Alchemy is a key skill in the magical world. A wizard named Rusty skillfully performs his daily quota of distilled water, which is necessary for creating potions and transforming magical creatures. Rusty's distilled water is distinguished by the fact that he fills it with magical energy, so it turns out better. Having finished work on time, Rusty stops the timer and prepares to spend the afternoon on his favorite research. But the mood changes when alchemical realism addresses him, and this unhealthy, overconfident man sneers and begins to insult Rusty. Realism mocks Rusty for working in the fundamental research department, saying that nothing important or profitable is done there, and obviously understands that the purpose of the research is to study and discover new things. Rusty calmly endures the mockery. This is not his first encounter with such behavior. Realism suggests Rusty visit the president, who wants to discuss a few issues. Moving to the president's office, Rusty, a talented alchemist, thinks about his place in the team and how often he is laughed at. Unlike Rusty, Realism works in the profitable weapons department, and because of this, others humiliate Rusty for earning little. Arriving at the president's office, Rusty learns that the president has decided to liquidate the fundamental research departments, completely cancel the budget, effectively dissolving it. The president justifies this by saying that the department does not bring profit. Assign Rusty small tasks for other departments. Essentially, he will be their errand boy. The president tells him to be grateful for any work and claims it is a favor. Then he exhales pipe smoke in Rusty's face and waves him off. Rusty remains silent during this conversation, seeing no point in arguing. Holding the letter, Rusty leaves the room feeling humiliated and disappointed in himself, and as he returns to his quarters, he recalls that the president's pipe was made by the research department, like many other tools. Rusty sits in a chair and looks at the ceiling. With the arrival of the new president, the department's budget and staff were greatly reduced, but he managed the workload and stress himself. The ring of his telecommunications device brought him back to reality, and he went to check the new message. Even the communication device was made in his department, showing how poorly he was treated, but good news arrives that lifts his spirits. A message from Colin, a close friend from school years. They had not seen each other since graduation. When she became a successful warrior after achievements in the recent war, the research work was worn out and neglected under the indifferent president. He dives into school memories with Colin, when they once turned the classroom into a jungle and then wrote the teacher a long apology for the mischief. Smiling at the memory, Rusty opens his letter to read it. Holland warmly greets Rusty and expresses deep respect, and informs that she has been granted a holding on the Borderland, where she now needs his help to develop it. This proposal puts Rusty before an important choice. He can either stay in his neglected apartment and endure the cruel treatment of Mr. Fat and Mr. I don't care, or he can leave everything, accept Tala's offer, and join her. With a bright smile and a spark in his eyes, Rusty looks out the window and decides to leave his thankless job in this terrible place. He longs to find joy again with Tala. Having made his decision, Rusty begins packing his things and recalls that before the arrival of the new president, he was the oldest in the department, so he is still attached to the work. The former president, Master Hallhammer, achieved success on his own and valued fundamental research. Together, they achieved outstanding results. After the change of government, Master Hallhammer was demoted, replaced by a former official, and since then work has gotten worse. Rusty goes to the president's office, but stops upon hearing voices behind the door. Realism and the president are discussing the research department's budget. The excessive flattery of Realism to the president is almost comical. It sounds like a third-grade student trying too hard to please, and it irritates the ear. I, irritated but restrained, knocked on the rusty door, and two inside were irritated upon learning about its rust. They reveal their hostility with screams and toxic behavior. Calmly and boldly, Rusty places his resignation letter on the president's desk and says he is done with them. In a moment of pure defiance, Rusty makes a powerful move that earns him great respect. The president, stunned by this unexpected action, reads the resignation statement soberly and without illusions. Due to the department's disbandment, Rusty has the right to leave anytime and is not obliged to train a replacement. The president, although trying to appear calm, is clearly irritated and cannot hide it. The president now tells Rusty that if he does not appreciate their generosity, he should immediately leave the association, saying this in a sharp tone. Rusty leaves the president's office, and before leaving the building, he stops to admire the majestic painting of the alchemist in the dungeon. It awakens many memories, but he says goodbye and walks away. Outside, Rusty breathes fresh air. glad to be free from the pressure and problems of the association. He summons his strength and calls forth his octopus hippopotamus. When he sets out for Talon, he feels a hint of danger in the air. Even his hippopotamus hears a strange sound from afar. Rusty warns his beast to be on alert because of bandits. He shuddered, saw an unconscious figure in the park, stopped, and became cautious. Approaching the figure, Rusty notices that it is the uniform of a night priest, a follower of the goddess of vengeance. Turning over the unconscious figure, Rusty notices a cursed pattern on her face, indicating an evil spell. This is yet another lady in distress, setting the tone for an exciting chapter. By instinct, Rusty activates his powers and begins scanning, as a brochure showing her condition hovers over the girl's body. Rusty examines the leaflet and the surroundings. He determines that the girl's life is not in danger, the curse can be controlled, and he could consult a specialist, but seeing her in agony. Rusty decides to act alone, unwilling to let her suffer. He quickly reviews the diagnosis and discovers that the fever is caused by poison in her body. He finds a wound on her side through which the poison entered. It seems this was caused by a familiar. Rusty rummages through his bag looking for an antidote but finds nothing. Therefore, he decides to make it himself. He orders his hippo to guard the wounded Giles. While he sets off to gather the necessary ingredients, Rusty rushes through the forest in search of the required plants, and Sin gasps for breath and stops to recover strength. Time in the association has clearly weakened his endurance, and after just a few minutes, he was gasping like an old man, so he took the endurance potion and drank it. Having received a surge of energy, you are lucky and find medicinal herbs near the stream. Standing atop this place, Rusty is puzzled because he remembers that there used to be many more plants here, but now there are fewer, probably someone constantly gathers them. Rusty still collects the necessary plants and flowers to make the antidote. Due to her condition, it is enough to know simple transmutation. He activates his powers, and the ingredients, drops of water, and the scroll rise and combine, forming the perfect healing potion. Since he has made antidotes all his life, this task is simple for Rust. When the potion was ready, he hurried back to the poisonous girls and approaching, heard heavy footsteps. He saw his hippopotamus jumping and smashing something dark and ugly on the ground. Rusty keeps his distance because he is afraid of being trampled by the hippopotamus's feet. The hippopotamus makes the final leap and crushes the creature under its 8 legs, approaching the unconscious creature, Rusty with relief. I see that his beast killed the familiar, who probably was chasing girls, possibly to finish her off. He kneels down and applies the antidote to the girl's wound. The wound heals quickly, bright sparks appear around her. She opens her eyes, her instincts awaken. She gets up and reaches with her hands for the sword. Her defensive posture, tense shoulders, and watchful gaze reveal her as a well-trained knight. She studies Rast, unsure if he is an enemy. Rusty points to the dead magical assistant and says that it was an enemy. She quickly looks around and asks who he is. In an even voice, Rusty begins to say that he is from the association, but stops and corrects himself, explaining that he is only a traveling alchemist, and his quick correction sounds smooth. The word alchemist awakens the girl's curiosity, and she approaches him. But the residual poison weakens her, and she almost falls. Rusty insists that she should not strain herself and offers an antidote. She looks closely and asks how much his help costs, and that is right. Rust is not used to receiving payment for helping others, so he hesitates. Remembering the times in the association, he scratches his head a little and looks puzzled, but explains to the girls that he helped her get out of goodwill. She calls herself Tala, the knight of the goddess of vengeance and the third of the 3 swords, believes that the antidote is of great value, and insists that there must be a way to repay him for his kindness. In response, Rusty offers an interesting plan, because he is going to the northern border to work under Tala's leadership, and asks her to lend the power of the sword to protect him in case of trouble. Tala agrees and shows her blade, saying that it will cut through any threat that may stand in his way. The deal looks very one-sided, because Rusty only makes a simple potion, and Tala gives up her formidable sword, and some would call this extremely uneven. However, Rusty does not dwell on this. He watches as Tala finishes preparing the antidote, cleansing it of poison, then jumps on this hippopotamus and says goodbye to her. Tala holds the vessel with the potion and watches it shine in the sun. Considering it a legendary elixir that saved her life, she is now indebted to this mysterious man. She decides to visit him in the north after she takes revenge, hoping to repay him generously. When night falls, Rast, continuing his journey, decides to spend the night. Climbing down from the hippopotamus, Rast tells him to rest while he lights the fire. After saying goodbye to Tala, he headed north and did not stop until it got dark. He admires the sky as if from a fairy tale, although deep darkness reigns on the horizon, and sitting by the fire, he feels a rare calm. Since joining the association, Russ Knight had been locked in the laboratory, far from the beauty of nature. He pulls out a map to see how far he has advanced to the border, finding their almost last village before the northern territory. While he studies the map, his hippopotamus tries to sneakily nibble something. Rast quickly reacts and jokingly tells his animal to calm down. He eats his portable rations, his reliable companions on the road. The next morning they arrive at Toma, a neglected village, completely unlike what Rusty expected. It looks almost abandoned, like the possessions of Tala. Rusty sends his hippopotamus back and explores the surroundings. Suddenly a man appears behind him, scares Rusty, and asks who he is. Rusty introduces himself as a traveling alchemist. The man lingers on the word alchemist, pushes Rusty to follow him to meet the village chief while they walk. Rusty is upset because he sees that most of the houses are abandoned and falling apart, until he notices one well-kept house, decorated with intertwined branches at the entrance. Rusty asks if this is the chief's house and where they can find the Kajero tree. But the man ignores him, knocks on the door, and calls the chief to come meet the alchemist. An elderly man with a wooden staff appears. The man announces that he has brought the alchemist to the chief. The man says he is not sure if Rusty is an alchemist, although he seems to be one, and this shows the village's despair. Rusty shows his identification, which confirms that he is an alchemist. The chief examines the medallion and asks if Rusty is of high rank. Russ, who had never thought about it, realizes that he is actually a high-ranking alchemist. Like many people in the association, the chief insists that Rusty come to his home because he wants to ask him something. They are offered tea and a large mug. Rusty drinks tea with relief after several days on dry rations. The chief quickly asks Rusty if he has any traditional magical crystals. Somewhat surprised, Rusty agrees to help find or make the crystals. He asks why they need the old models, and the chief says that the magical weapon was upgraded almost a year ago during the war. Wait, why do you need weapons, old man? The chief explains that both old and new magical pistols were supplied by Zala, a guy who looked suspicious from the very beginning, and complains that the new pistols were a complete scam. Zala still produces both types of weapons, and the chief explains how this weapon protected defenseless peasants from beasts. The 32-gun ship was valued for fuel efficiency and excellent performance. However, the last model one had many problems. It was expensive, especially the crystals, often broke down and was unreliable. Worse still, the manufacturer stopped supplying old crystals, forcing peasants to buy the new model and spend extra money. This led to more frequent animal attacks and human casualties. Rusty listens to their concerns and agrees to make the old crystals. But in return, he asks Kodro to keep his fee. The chief and Zal looked at each other confusedly, but agreed to take him to the trees with the cargo. They arrive and the chief orders everyone to gather as much cargo and fruit as possible. After that, Rusty gets to work and takes out 3 scrolls. Look how he boasts about his talents. He knows that magical stones come from beasts. But there is another way that uses elements of the atmosphere. He takes the fruit of Kagra and mixes it to purify the elements and form a pure diamond. Rusty explains that magical crystals have 3 parameters: size, power, and capacity, which must match. If not, they will not work. Fortunately, Rusty remembers the standards of old model crystals and skillfully uses them. Magical elements are sealed in the Kegger fruit and form a magical crystal. Light, strength, and brilliance surround Rusty as he works skillfully and confidently. He finishes and holds the crystal in his hand, proud of his success. The peasants behind him greet him and admire his magic. The crystals are ready. Rusty gives one to the chief and tells him to load the .32 caliber pistol and try it. The chief nods, takes the pistol, inserts the crystal, then aims it at the sky and fires. The rifle thundered and fired a bullet at incredible speed. The bullet cut a huge hole in the sky, and the clouds swirled around. This spectacle impressed everyone, and they joyfully welcomed it, now able to live without fear of beasts and magical creatures. Rusty smiles, happy that the peasants are celebrating because of his creation, which brings him peace. After that, he begins making more crystals, and after an hour of intense work, he produces enough for the peasants to last for years. The power of the crystal would be twice as much as the market won. The chief's eyes widened when he was told about such an unusual offer. He can barely imagine such wealth because his people lived in poverty for centuries and no one helped them. The chief begins to think about how to use all these crystals and delves into reflections on possibilities. Soon the leader calms down and orders everyone to gather the crystals and bring them to the village. Rasti attracts the chief's attention and asks to talk alone about an urgent matter. The chief agrees that privacy is needed for this conversation. He gestures for Rasti to follow him to his house. Before leaving, he orders the villagers to clear the debris, but Rasti approaches and clears everything in a moment. The couple arrives at the leader's house, where Rasti is given a cup of tea and a mug. Their poverty is visible, and when Rasti drinks the warm tea, he is enveloped by a pleasant feeling. Apparently, this is a reward for hard work during the day. He sets the mug aside and becomes serious. The chief looks nervous, as if expecting bad news. But Rasti Konsum says that this is not a serious problem. He only wants to talk about their next steps. The chief was worried that Rusty might demand payment for all the crystals. He feels like he just avoided a crisis. Rusty explains that he made so many crystals that one would be enough for the village for years, so he is curious whether other villages still use outdated magical crystals. The chief says that all the villages in this remote area are in urgent need of these crystals, and Rusty could help them a lot. Rusty takes a confident stance and says he will do business with the new Night Kingdom named Kalon, from where he will develop crystal trade. The mention of Kalon makes the chief straighten up. Rusty is not only a skilled alchemist, he also has connections with some of the most powerful and famous warriors of his time. The chief asks if this is the same Kalon who can knock down 3 men in armor with one sword strike. She seems fragile but has strength that surpasses even the strongest fighters, so she got a nickname. Rusty interrupts and refuses to hear the nickname again because he is tired of it being repeated constantly. The nickname makes his old friends from the academy sound like monsters. The chief apologizes, and Rusty returns to the topic. He wants to secretly talk to the chiefs about this, Lord, since creating a new domain requires expenses and has its difficulties. Moreover, he has not yet talked about it with Colin, who may have her own plans regarding him. Rusty takes another sip of tea and thinks that maybe Colin and the lord of the village can agree on a deal or strategy that will benefit him and the villagers. Because Rusty has created enough magical crystals for everyone, the chief can give something to the lord to get a deal favorable to us. Rust's mind works like a well-oiled mechanism, and he immediately asks for it. A pen and paper from the chief to write a letter to a friend. This friend from the academy now serves in the army because the matter concerns weapons and magical crystals. Rusty anticipates possible objections from others that may hinder his path to success. People like Realism, whose income and activities heavily depend on the crystals and weapons supplied by Rusty, may be put on hold. Realism does not want to share his achievements with others, especially with Russ, whom he deeply offended. But Rusty pays no attention to this fool because he aims to build an empire and cannot afford to focus on such petty and unimportant people. He knows that the crystals can eventually spread beyond the region and attract the attention of Realism and his team. If noticed, the army might intervene, and the consequences are unpredictable. Therefore, Rusty writes an official letter and rolls it up, and seals it with the initials of his pendant to show his high rank. He stands up to leave, but the chief asks Rusty to stay overnight. Rusty politely declines and wishes to continue his journey quickly. Wessie leaves the house. Villagers surround him and beg for help with their affairs. Confused, Rusty quickly raises his head. Popo hurries out of the village to avoid delay. These villagers are quite intrusive. In his travels, Rusty is surprised by the absence of animals or creatures in the wasteland, so he does not know what monsters might threaten him. Suddenly, a monster attacks. Popo's senses sharpen. He crushes the monster's tentacles and instantly defeats it. Rusty condemns Popo and collects the remains of the dead monster, which might be useful later. He reviews the map, which shows that soon he will be near a body of water. From there, the road will be short. Rusty arrives at the lake and intends to rest. But Popo's restlessness keeps him on alert. Something stirred in the water and emits a magical aura. Rusty approaches to check. But a small lizard suddenly flies out and almost touches his face, struggling to break free from the slippery tentacles of the monster chasing it. The unfortunate lizard is trapped and looks at Rusty fearfully. This makes him suppose that it is a child transformed into a lizard, although it has no human eyes or emotions. Rusty hesitates to save or touch the creature because many beings imitate human emotions to deceive and attack. It is the law of the wild, where only the strong survive, and the weak are hunted by predators. Still, the lizard's eyes attract Ras. He orders Popo to strike the tentacles and immediately free the lizard. Popo does not wait for a second order and jumps into the air like a ballerina, with 8 tentacles weighing over 500 kilograms, breaking the tentacle holding the lizard, which injured retreats into the water. Rasti takes the severed tentacle to use later and checks the lizard. That does not react to his light push. It seems the lizard has exhausted all its strength and is completely drained. Our hero uses his ability to examine the creature. But because it is a beast, it is difficult for him to precisely determine the problem. Fortunately, he uncovers new abilities within himself and discovers that the lizard is severely exhausted. Perhaps its mitochondria are not functioning properly. They weaken because they spent too much energy avoiding pursuit. Rusty orders Popo to stay alert. The small creature dives into the water and engages in a fight with the catfish monster, while Rusty looks for a way to restore the lizard's health. Hippo successfully defeats the catfish monster and proudly shows it to his master as a trophy. Next, Rusty applies a potion to the lizard and is pleased to see its energy gradually returning. Mitochondrial activity has noticeably improved and may exceed the norm. He wants to leave the lizard, but hesitates because he worries that after all his efforts, another predator might find and kill it. Because of this, Rusty decides to take the unconscious lizard with him for the rest of the journey and keep it on his lap. He takes out a map, plans the rest of the route, and sees that he has to go along the river from the pond to reach the destination. Rusty arrives at a camp with round tents and thinks it belongs to Colin, but Hippo stops and shows concern. Preventing further progress, Russ is not a fool. He senses that something is wrong. He climbs down from his beast, lifts the medallion, and loudly says that he is Russ, a master alchemist of the highest rank. His sect unites people seeking the truth, and he is indeed traveling to this land at the invitation of the Knight Colonel. Although not foolish, Rusty may seem a bit out of sorts, shouting into the air and waiting for his medallion. Suddenly 2 girls appear, their faces partially covered with cloths and resembling a cat with one eye sticking out its tongue. Well done, Colin, very skillful. One of the Geralds draws her sword but greets Russ. Explains that monsters in the area can disguise themselves as humans, so strict precautions are necessary. Rusty now understands why Hippo was so uneasy, as he sensed danger from afar. If Hippo had not stopped, the girls could have attacked them. Our main hero, Tax, put the medallion back into his pocket and looked confident in front of the 2 girls. The girls were impressed that he noticed them so quickly. Continuing to act cool, one Gerald feels a powerful aura from Hippo and Whirly asks if there is a monster on the beast's back. She almost attacks until her sister Iri intervenes. Rusty takes full responsibility for the lizard and assures them that it poses no threat. The girl relaxes. Meanwhile, he notices that the younger sister has a unique visual ability. She can see at great distances, and the older one seems to be able to assess the strength of people or beasts. After the introduction, the girls lead Rusty to the tent, where It is impressive to see how many people work with a large communication device, and it seems that all the data is concentrated at headquarters. He is impressed by the high quality of work and the skill of the employees here. While he watches the operations, Colin calls him from behind and enthusiastically approaches him. Colin has not aged at all. She is still incredibly beautiful. She approaches Rusty and firmly takes his hand. He winced in pain. Poor Russ, who had not had female company for many years. Colin is glad to meet Rusty again after so many years and jokes that he has aged. Rusty is not thrilled with the remark, but keeps himself together. Collins radiates bright energy, and she asks if her girls in masks caused him trouble, pointing at 2. Rusty understands that Colin arranged their meeting, probably hoping for some adventure. It seems this is her way of having fun. Rusty scratches his head and insists that there were no problems with the girls because he is a romantic, not a fighter. Enough of this fuss, Russ. Colin smiles, sorry. Quietly invites him to go with her on a tour of the camp. It seems to me that Colin is very caring. The world is full of magical elements that affect the soil, animals, and monsters, but people do not suffer from this. Explain why. Turning back to the camp, Colin effortlessly lifts an entire table with one hand to make room for her and Rusty so they could sit and discuss matters. She orders Rohan to bring tea, making sure they are alone in the tent. Rusty sensus, his old friend, is about to say something serious. He jokingly says that he thought the job would involve resting and extracting magical elements from the earth. Colin takes the joke lightly and says that it is partly so, but the role requires more than it seems. She calls him the genius of the academy, a nickname from school years. Ross, hiding his embarrassment, asks what is bothering her. Colin plays with her gloves before explaining that he needs to. First treat the disease spreading through the camp, then look for its source. With clear tasks, Rusty gets up and is led to the tent. On the way, he notices an unfriendly atmosphere. People look at him coldly and ignore his greetings. These people have serious attitude problems. Rusty also concludes that the disease here is endemic. That is, newcomers to the camp gradually get sick and show symptoms. Rusty felt better because two girls treat him better than others, but he is mistaken. The younger sister sharply warns him not to humiliate Lady Colin, otherwise she will not forgive him. After that, the sisters disappear. Rusty realizes that he will have to work harder than he expected to earn the camp's trust. He enters a spacious tent without furniture, as he expected from Colin, because he knows that he prefers his own. Rusty uses his powers and creates a carpet and a beanbag chair so that the lizard can rest. The lizard is so exhausted that it slept the entire way. Rusty then summons Manifest Rose, a transmuted beast that resembles a plant, but at the same time looks like a hippopotamus in nature. He orders the rose to make a sturdy bed for the lizard so that it can rest peacefully. After that, Rusty orders to prepare beds for the patients who will come to his tent for treatment. After that, he allows Rowan and Eri to admit patients one by one to provide assistance. He listens to their complaints, which are almost the same, including fatigue, body aches, and soreness. Rusty distributes potions to relieve symptoms and determine the cause of the illness. There may be side effects, but he will deal with them later. Right now, it is more important to provide proper treatment. Rowan is impressed that Rusty manages to see almost all the patients before sunset. He also compiles a detailed report on symptoms and possible side effects after treating the last patient. Rusty offers the tired Rohan a potion to cheer him up and relieve fatigue. She drinks, surprised that her energy returns, quickly thanks him, and hurries to leave. Rusty tries to find common ground with others, but they need time to get used to him. He finishes the report and goes to meet Colin. On the way, grateful workers thank him for healing them. They said that nothing less was expected from Colin's friend. Unlike the previous job, where there was little praise, Rusty rarely received recognition for his work, but now he feels valued. Night falls over the camp, and he hurries to Colin's tent. Having entered inside, he meets an attractive colonel who asks why he came so late, and he hands her the prepared report. Colin reviews it, impressed by his efficiency. Her striking eyes express gratitude. Rusty downplays his role, but a loud rumbling in his stomach makes him nervous. Rups made Colin laugh warmly and admitted she hadn't laughed like that in a long time. Russ's charisma is undeniable. Enough, the next day Rohan and Eri lead Rusty to the food storage to check. Before departure, he calls Hippo to carry them. In the warehouse, Rusty uses a pendulum and measures the density of magical elements outside with it. The stronger the magic, the wider the pendulum swings, and Rusty records the readings on a scroll. Walking around the warehouse, he notices a high magical concentration in the soil, which prevents microbes from surviving and makes the surrounding area sterile. He notices several usual strong readings and realizes that Rohan can help. A pleasant surprise, considering his usual aloofness. Rusty was the least pleased with the unexpected cooperation. The master alchemist notices that magical elements are strongly concentrated everywhere. Products are usually stored in the basement because it is cool and dark there. Since strong magical elements in remote areas destroy microbes, this is standard practice that guarantees the safety of prepared food. It is hard to accept that local microbes in the food cause illness. Rusty wonders if the remains of a monster that once lived in the pantry could be the cause. To make sure, he plans to ask Rowan if this was the monster's lair and which one exactly. He smiles, awaiting Rowan's reaction to his leading question, and Rowan says that the nest belonged to a bear. This arouses Russ's curiosity about the creature. Their conversation is interrupted by a man approaching. He asks if this is Master Rusty and thanks him for helping his younger brother. The man says that his brother's limb numbness was very troublesome, but Russ's treatment significantly improved his condition. His family is grateful, and he offers Rusty any help to show his thanks. Rusty smiles, suspecting that the brother was one of those he treated yesterday. Rusty asks to inspect the food storeroom, and the man leads him inside. Rusty examines everything. He sees various food items. From monster meat to plant vegetables and grains, everything here is processed. Rusty notes that the storeroom, packed with ingredients from monsters, looks like the end of a bad joke, and he notices that the food is well preserved without traces of poison or monster remains. Rusty thanks the man and allows him to lock the room when he leaves. Harry asks if it is possible to exclude the compound as the source of the disease. Rusty warns that it is not yet possible to be completely sure and calls for further investigation. Erie's older sister asks where they are going next. Rusty points to a jug with purified water for drinking and cooking, marking it as their next stop. They approach the jug that distributes limited water across the Collins territory. Rusty notices that the jug is old, but confirms that the purification function works properly and finds no faulty parts. Rusty thinks that if his secret were as transparent as the water in the jug, the task would be easier, and due to numbness from the disease, he suspects poisoning and checks both food and water. He feels that the decision will not be easy. Round interrupts and asks if it is time for a lunch break. Rusty is momentarily startled before agreeing and finds the persistent request to take a lunch break strange. But he realizes that Colin probably instructed the sisters to make sure he eats while they accompany him. Reflecting, Rusty recalls how Colin force-fed him during intense research at the academy. The sisters lead him to the camp canteen and say that the food is prepared in the neighboring tent. Before eating, he asked Sippo what he wanted to eat. He was ashamed that even his favorite was eating better than him. Rusty can cook the hippopotamus's favorite dish from finely crushed magical stones and herbal granules. He knows that transformed animals need balanced magical nutrition. This dish suits the hippopotamus, who eats it willingly. The sisters bring Ras's dish. Main dish from hunted monsters, smoke for preservation. The dish contains a side of fried, edible parts of local plant monsters and a main dish of finely crushed dry grains. This is a simple menu, but the cooks are clearly trying to improve the taste a bit. Rusty asks if everyone eats in the canteen, and Rohan explains that families often eat at home, but most singles die in the canteen. This reminds Rusty of the academy canteen. They eat silently, but he feels the sisters are looking at him through masks. He asks if they noticed anything common among the patients, or if they heard about new cases today. Irie says that during the meal, he did not work. Adds that she has not heard about new cases and has not seen common signs among patients. Rusty notes that in Irie's comment, it is mentioned that many patients are unmarried. Irie explains that this is not LAR, but it is a valid observation. Rowan says that she brought patients from the singles tent. This interests Russ. He suspects that the pattern confirms that singles eat in the dining hall, and begins to record his thoughts. Because of this, Rusty discovers something, and urgently tells the sisters to stop eating. He finds traces of monster neurotoxin in the food that correspond to the symptoms. Smiling, Riley says that even lunch breaks bring breakthroughs. While Rusty checks the food, Irie warns everyone in the tent to stop eating. Possible poisoning noted. Rusty explains that many patients from the singles tent use the dining hall, and since the water purification system is working normally, he narrows down the circle of suspects. The sisters are puzzled when the kitchen manager approaches and asks about the problem with the food. Rusty apologizes for being called suddenly and introduces himself, saying that by Lady Collins' order he is investigating this illness, and asks to inspect the kitchen to check his theory. Inside, Russ's tests confirm his suspicions. He asks Rohan to pass the message to Colin and tells the kitchen manager that she needs to act immediately. She agrees, and Rusty tells her to come to Colin's tent in an hour to explain everything fully. In an hour, everyone, including the single men's tent manager and the kitchen manager, gathers in Colin's tent. Colin asks Rusty if he has overcome the epidemic. Rusty, feeling heroic, smiles slightly proudly. He says that the lake upstream from the camp river hides a monster whose neurotoxic poison contaminates the water. The problem is not with the purified drinking water, but with the water used to wash dishes in the laundry. Colin confirms that they use this water for such tasks. Rusty finds traces of poison on the dishes and clothes in the single men's tent. They penetrate the body through the skin and mouth, accumulate, and cause disease. His discovery shocks everyone, who is ashamed that they missed it. Collins reassures them, explaining that due to the limited amount of purified water, it had to be conserved, so no one should think it is their fault. Colin admits that she distributed the water evenly. She decides to review the water distribution among the facilities and get rid of the monster upstream that causes poisoning. Rusty says that he already defeated the monster when he was saving the white lizard. Further astonishing everyone, Colin jokingly asks if Rusty can see the future. After a night of working with patience, she found the source of the disease the next day and destroyed the monster. She considers its speed almost audacious. Rusty explains that the source of the poison has disappeared. The water will soon be fine, having confirmed together with Popo that there are no other monsters in the pond. Returning to Colin, Rusty said that the task was completed. He earned her admiration with his outstanding work, and she sincerely thanks him. Rusty notes that since the disease is caused by a small dose of poison, cases may increase. He promised to treat everyone affected and asked Colin to refer those feeling unwell to him. He calls, agrees, and asks about the update on the filtering pitcher. Rusty consents, provided there is sufficient funding. Colin promises to give everything he needs, and Rusty is glad to have completed his first mission. He looks forward to life on the border, but is wary of problems in the Alchemists Association. Later, Ari introduces herself as she is in Rohan. Go down Portman Street in the capital, looking for the large rusty water pitcher that was requested. They discussed Russ, and Harry sensed his immense combat power from the start and realized he was unlike other alchemists. She thinks that even together they could not oppose him, and suggests that this causes mixed feelings toward Russ in Rohan. Harry thinks about talking about his feelings, but feels that Rohan is holding them back. They enter the store to buy a jug, and then head to the Rusty Mansion magical items shop. Walking through the city, the tense atmosphere contrasts with the calm of Portland Street, and Ari notices passers-by with serious faces, probably because of the many magic shops in this area. They arrive at the right store, where a friendly seller warmly welcomes them. The sisters browse magical items until the merchant offers to buy their goods. The guard, noticing they are not dressed as alchemists, asks who sent them. They show the seal of Alchemist Russ, and she agrees to buy their things. Although prices for alchemical goods have risen, Rusty ordered to keep the usual prices, which she respects, praising his excellent potions. Impressed by her honesty, the sisters receive a generous sum, which Rusty allowed as travel expenses. Leaving the store, Iri suggests eating something tasty, and they go to a restaurant. They recall how they started their assignments, and how Colin searched for doctors even before Russ, but everyone fled because they were afraid of the disease. Progress began only when Rusty arrived. The sisters showed patience towards him, and soon everyone was coming out of his tent better. He quickly treated patients and eliminated the cause of the disease, proving that he is exceptional. Iri thoughtfully considers during the meal whether to ask Rusty for help with her eye problem. The sisters quietly nod through their masks, their thoughts full of new ideas. In the equipment storage of the Alchemists Association, Realist grumbles about his duties, blaming Rusty for abandoning them. He believes that Rusty is not devoted and does not value the association. Recently, the association faced many problems, so all master alchemists had to leave their usual tasks to restore order. Dangerous materials are stored in special storages. They must be handled carefully because some monster parts can explode if mishandled. Previously, the storage was overseen by an administrator, but due to budget cuts, he was dismissed, and Realist remembers that Rusty headed the storage after joining the basic research department, which was later disbanded, leaving the dangerous materials unattended. Problems arise, in particular the discharge of viscous liquid from the carrion slime. The Realist knows that access to the storage is limited only to masters due to dangerous Class 1 materials, so masters cannot entrust subordinates with work in it. At that moment, a subordinate ran in to report problems and a statement that the vice president of the Arms Association is calling the Realist. The Realist orders his subordinate Tak to have other masters cover the storage while he meets with the vice president. Left alone, Tak thinks about how to manage the masters. He decides to close the storage door to contain the magical elements, but realizes that he needs the master's medallion to lock it. He goes to the entrance of the association to wait for someone to return. The safe door remains ajar. Meanwhile, Vice President Horn scolds the Realists for making him wait. The Realists explain that the supplies of the basic transmutation material are lagging. Horn demands the delivery of army equipment for the upcoming war and threatens fines for delays. Realist apologizes, but Horn got angry upon noticing his unpleasant smell. Realist knows that this is from the collector's line and tries to change it, but Horn demands a delivery schedule. Realist nervously looks at Salazar, who also appears uncertain. Someone promises that the order will be ready tomorrow. Horn agrees, but the Realist panics because the task is too difficult. Later in the weapons alchemy department laboratory, all apprentice alchemists gather, even on a day off. Realist reports that he has to deliver magical schematics for the Weapons Association. Since the army needs firearms and the deadline is approaching, Realist questions the reason for the delays, and Salazar explains that they lack a sufficient amount of high-quality, distilled water for the solutions used in writing the schematics. Realist is stunned that such a simple problem causes chaos. Tao arrives with a device for checking magical circuits and a board with distilled water. They try to perform transmutation, but Tao inspects the board. It is found that it contains enough magical elements, but it does not start due to lack of energy and unstable magical radiation. The alchemist notes that Russ's distilled water would improve the solutions. Irritable Realist, who forbids mentioning the name Russ, revealing his strong envy. Realism reports that it will create distilled water better than rust to quickly complete magical circles. His irritation and competitive spirit are noticeable when he takes on the task, and he steadfastly strives to show his skills, and after a few hours Realism evaluates the quality of his distilled water, impatiently awaiting the results. Zabuza tells him that it exceeds expectations, but cautiously remains silent that it does not meet the safety threshold. This oversight increases the risk of product quality deterioration and may harm the association's reputation if problems arise. Sabater agrees that rusty water was better, but continues to move forward. He is silent about Realism's reaction, only noting that the values meet the standards. Satisfied Realism urges the alchemist to continue working on the system. As midnight approaches, a growing explosion shakes the laboratory from behind. Tao in shock noticed that he left the storage door ajar, and because of this, a voracious slime, filled with magical elements, began to uncontrollably spread. The alchemist panics because the slime is spreading and destroying the laboratory. They hurriedly grab tools to fend off, including a wooden box containing a magical schematic. But the size and strength of the slime make it a formidable opponent. Alchemists throw everything they have at it, trying to contain the damage. The night turns into a tense struggle. They fight the relentlessly growing slime, and their initial confidence is overshadowed by a sudden crisis. Before Realism could intervene, an explosion occurred, throwing it back. The rest of the alchemists abandoned Realism and devoted themselves to taming chaos, but they managed to complete their work. Salazar ordered the skinny one to deliver the magical schematics to the Weapons Association at dawn. After Realism, the slimy creature now retreats. He allows her to use the transformed beast for movement. Meanwhile, Colin's morning starts early. She notices her tousled hair after sleep but ignores it. She savors a hearty breakfast with steak, and although there is little at the food border, she eats just like her team and trains with them. Colin meets every challenge with a smile, although nightmares torment her at night. She recalls her frustration and helplessness when her subordinates fell ill, and is sincerely grateful to those who saved them. Palin knows that Rusty left the association after her call because he considered his former boss incompetent. Now under her leadership, she is committed to giving him freedom and rewards. One morning, noticing that Rusty woke up early, she asks if he is going out. He says he is gathering materials, and she asks him to be careful and thanks him again for the help. She feels that she will always owe him for the rescue. She promises to give him everything he needs. Colin advises Rusty to rely on others and warns that the habit of being a loner can harm his health, so he should not always do everything by himself. Rust, impressed by her leadership growth, smiles and agrees to let her support him. They commit to working closely together, their partnership stronger than ever. Rusty returns to the camp on his faithful hippopotamus after a successful hunt, and everything looks promising. Colin received funds to solve the water shortage problem. The hunters gathered the necessary materials from the monsters. Only the jugs remain to be obtained. The mangaka's love for her character is noticeable, so everything goes smoothly, although a major plot twist may be ahead. Rusty thinks he might have to hunt more monsters to satisfy the camp's growing needs, and it's good that he prepared the necessary scrolls in advance. Soon Rusty and Hippo return to the camp, and the crowd welcomes Rusty back from the hunt. Amid the excitement, he notices Leitna and approaches him. Rusty tells that during the monster hunt, he gathered fascinating materials on alchemy, and this immediately interested Leitna. The young beginner alchemist eagerly asks to buy materials at the monster disassembly station. Everyone looks at Rusty because the camp is eagerly waiting to see the monster he brought. Rust elegantly waved and pronounced a spell, opened a scroll, and revealed Formale Twin 9 Hun. Everyone was amazed that one hunter could bring down such majestic beasts. Shrugging at their admiration, Rusty casually says that he has more. He reveals 1,000 rats, a hell horse, and a mole bear. Leighton's jaw dropped in the hall. Then Rusty goes to Inspector Me and, like everyone in the camp, shows him the caught monsters, and the inspector is impressed by Rust's skill. Noticing that he had never seen 1,000 rat before, and that mole-like bears and hell horses are known to be hard to hunt, this emphasizes Rust's remarkable skill. Next, Rusty goes to Rose, but this is not a girl named Rose, but a real Rose. He thanks Rose for watching over his things and asks her to continue doing so. Meanwhile, his faithful companion Rosa successfully brought many jugs to the camp. Rusty thanks Rosa and examines the jugs. Impressed that he found months, he asked if she had any difficulties transporting them. But Rosa waved it off and said that the atmosphere in the capital was tense and some goods were becoming more expensive. Rusty asks about Colin, but knowing that everything was reported to him, he also believes everything. Stopping the small talk, Rusty gets down to business and asks Roger to step aside while he casts the cleansing spell on the water again. The process requires more physics than a 9th grade textbook. As an alchemist, Rusty grinds magical stones into dust. He mixes them with absolutely pure water and directs magical energy so that it remains pure and complies with the laws of physics. Thus, he prepared a magical elixir that solved the problem of the magic circle, and Roy was impressed by its effectiveness. Rusty moves from physics to the principles of chemistry, and it is quite complicated. Continuing to purify the water, he ignores the limitations of gravity and refers to his chemistry textbook. He throws into the water strange-shaped constructions, possibly magical visual images or real chemical formulas, and connects the magical solution to the magical circuit of the jug. To eat only the magical crystal to feed the jug, or use formulas to permanently purify the water. Rust Everthorough explains the physics and chemistry of all this to purify the water, and then applies these methods to the rest of the jugs. Excited, Robert approaches the group and rejoices that they can now take as much water as they need, but Rusty interrupts and explains that this is only the beginning of what applied chemistry and physics are capable of. Robert, like the others, looks confused, and Rusty begins to explain that at this stage the jugs are just for storing water, then announces a plan to create a new magical device that will eliminate the need to carry water to the camp. Rust claims that thanks to his first law of applied chemistry, he will cause rain from the sky, and Ro, puzzled and interested by the bold statement, asks if he can really do it. She says she wants to see the process. Rusty invites her to the lake. Hippo instruction on water collection, and prepares a magical device to extract water from the pot. The process is too complex for detailed description, as is the chemistry itself. Meanwhile, the hippopotamus surfaces from the lake with a small fish in its mouth, showing that there are no big threats or monsters below. Rusty sets up the device, and Ro asks if it depends on a magical stone of a certain monster. Rusty confirms, explaining that he checked the water to make sure there is no paralyzing cloud in it. A byproduct of an extremely dangerous monster, invulnerable to physical attacks. Ro remains guessing about the full extent of Rust's abilities. When Rusty turns on the device, Ro asks what it is called. Rusty casually suggests calling it a cloud water distribution device when it starts turning water into clouds. He says the paralyzing cloud is like a cloud monster, but with a magic stone at its center. Robert watches with admiration as the clouds float toward the pitchers, guided by a magic circle that Rusty placed inside to direct the water. Clouds, unaffected by physical interference, behave like a gas, without shape and without fixed volume, and this idea is simplified by an outdated concept. Jokingly mentions E equals MC2. Pipes are useless in the camp due to monster attacks, so Rust plans a clever and impressive combination of magic and applied chemistry. Rust, Ro, and Hippo return to the camp, with Rusty and Ro sitting atop the animal. Rusty is pleased to see the water pouring into the pitchers as planned. Eri suddenly called him and informed that Lady Colin needs him. Wanting to find out if something is wrong, Rusty hurries to meet Colin. Hands over 2 parchments, one open, the other sealed. She praises him for efficiency, noting that an ordinary alchemist would need days to set up the system with the jug and purification, but Rusty did it almost instantly. Ignoring the compliment, Rusty examines the parchments, which seem to have come from Thomas's village. He asked Colin while she consulted with the feudal lord before starting to trade magical crystals. Noticing that the situation seems favorable, Collins's facial expression becomes serious, stating that circumstances are much more important than simple promises. Honestly, it is truly impressive. Colin gently grabs Rusty by the collar and asks what trick he used. Rusty protests, telling Colin that she is tearing his shirt. Seeing this, Colin quickly steps back, knowing about her immense strength. She could easily shake Rusty if she grabbed him by the collar and shook him. After a short pause, Rusty assures Colin that there was no trickery. Enterprise revolves around traditional magical crystals. Collins became interested and asks if these are H32-sized crystals. Embarrassed, she asks if Rusty can really handle it, and in a moment admits that Rusty, of course, can handle it. Transitioning to business, Colin asks Rusty if he understands that diving into the interests of capital is to challenge those who control it. Rusty confirms that he understands, winks slightly at Colin, and looks slightly irritated. Colin asks if Rusty expects that she has to deal with further conflicts. It would be funny to see them both when Rusty washes the dishes and Colin juggles several jobs. Rusty says he consulted Harold about this, and the answers are recorded on parchment. Colin pauses, recalling that Harold did not use parchment. It becomes clear that problems are brewing in the capital. She notes that she has heard similar concerns from Eri and Ro, although she did not think it would be so serious. Obviously, Rusty and Colin are plotting something. Laka reminds of old friends quietly conspiring in an adult math class. Their thoughts coincide. They see a good opportunity and decide when to act. Colin assigns Rusty the task of investigating and says he will have a lot of work. Rusty politely took her arm, accepting the challenge. He says the situation reminds him of the old days. A light breeze blows, but not strong. Today, Rusty is launching his project with magical crystals in the neighboring domain. He is waiting by the camp entrance together with Rowan and Ro. The sunlight is soft and pleasant, so even the wait feels pleasant. Rowan suddenly reports that he sees a group approaching. He notices that one figure seems formidable. Rusty realizes that he entrusted all negotiations to others and does not know the details. The contract issues and boring deal details are handled by external contractors. Focusing on transforming kokoro fruits into magical crystals for great profit, fraying Rusty has great freedom of action. There is no established minimum or maximum crystal extraction, so decisions are made for convenience. Still, he will consult with Colin before serious changes in production volumes. Rusty is impressed that they managed to secure such favorable terms. Surveying the area, he sees that it is a remote region without proper roads, where mules are more practical than wheeled transport. He believes that in the future, the priority should be road improvements. Ultimately, these decisions are made by Boss Colin, so Rusty is not very worried. Looking over the caravan, he notices that some people are wounded and concludes that they were probably attacked. Next, he notices a familiar person named Azala among the group and immediately approaches to greet her. It seems Zala was once a student of Rast. She warmly greets Rasty and briefly encourages him. Rasty notices the wounded in the caravan and offers them treatment. Fortunately, no one was seriously hurt, so Rasty takes out a potion to help the wounded. Amid the bustle, Raven calls Rasty. Rasty is surprised to see Tala among the caravan. He remembers her as Nake, who was rescued when she was going to meet the calendar. Tal says she was going to talk to Rasty, and when she found out the caravan was going the same way, she decided to join them. Zala adds that Tala saved the caravan from a monster several times. Rasty welcomes Tala at the border with open arms and a warm greeting. After polite words, he offers her to relax with a cup of tea, sensing that she might be tense. He suspects that Tala wants to discuss something private away from prying ears. Rasty invites her to his tent for tea, and Tala agrees without hesitation. Meanwhile, Zala asks Rasty to take the keg fruits to the square, which Round calls a simple task. Inside the tent, Rasty shows Tala everything around. Tala is impressed to see that all the furniture is made of ice, and Rasty invites her to sit, addressing her as Lady Tala. Tala quickly asks him to skip the formalities, reminding him that she saved his life, and insists on being called Tala. Rasty replies that she can also call him Rasty. It seems a connection is just beginning between them and may develop over time. Rasty might find a partner in Tala. Rasty offers Tala a warm cup of tea, and she notices its rich aroma. After a brief awkward pause, Tala said she wants to talk about the shaman with Rust. Rasty asks if she means the one who sent the familiar for her. Tala confirms and explains that after Rasty left, she followed his trail to the capital and felt shame and destroyed her church. It was then that a curse fell upon her, bringing shame and the Pathfinder. But after Rasty lifted the curse, Tala found the shaman's hideout, remaining unnoticed. Unfortunately, he escaped. However, Tala found several interesting chips there and gave one to Russ. Rusty suspects that it might be cursed, so he puts on gloves with the effect of a cleansing scroll before examining the chip. He asks if Tala showed it to the Alchemists Association in the capital. Tala says she did not do that because it seemed risky, so she tried not to attract attention. She adds that the church was in a state of disrepair. The walls were covered with holes of various sizes, and there was an unpleasant smell in the air. From the rust, the workers' faces look lifeless, like walking dead. He suspects that the problems are caused by a slime-like creature or some other entity. Probably someone is already dealing with it. The highest variant of Rusty prays to hide the chips. He explains that a chip is a magical board that converts magical elements into flames, a characteristic feature of the Alchemists Association transmutation. He also says that there were many magical pistols in the stash, hinting at the connection between the association and the shaman. Rusty considers this situation very alarming. Magical weapons are very effective against other living creatures, but they do not work on humans. Changing the magical element causes a phenomenon called loss during transformation. If the weapon is intended only for monsters, changing elements is not necessary. This indicates that the transformation is designed for use against humans and reveals its true intent. Tola understands the troubling consequences of this discovery. Rusty adds that there is another problem. The weapon is likely to misfire, which could harm nearby people, probably not intended, so this points to a mistake. Rusty regrets that this sloppy work comes from his former workplace, and he is disappointed with their careless management. Tola says she did the right thing by turning to Rusty and thanks him for the important advice. Rusty offers Ptolemy Lady Colin, who is eager to introduce them. Tala thanks for the delicious tea and prepares to join Rusty, but he has matters to attend to, so he cannot dine with her. Since Zala and others are leaving tomorrow, Rusty must focus on transforming Kegra's fruits into magical crystals. Starting work at the dining table, Lady Colin from Talamida, surrounded by numerous appetizing dishes. Tala notices women sitting to the left and right of Colin's, likely her faithful companions. The kind Lady Colin warmly welcomes Tala to the Dominion. Round reflects on the strange twists of fate that brought Tala to the caravan and allowed her to protect it on the road. Seeing that Tala is weary from travel and hungry, Colin says they have prepared a small meal, although it is actually not modest at all. Before her lies a luxurious feast that awakens the senses. Thanking her goddess, Tala begins to enjoy the food and feels as if she has entered another world. The taste of meat fills her mouth, herbs and juices perfectly balanced and forming an incredible culinary delight, and Tala thinks this unique meat may come from a monster whose flavor she has never experienced. She concludes that since monster meat contains magical elements, this special dish likely comes from a high-ranking creature. Gathering her courage, Tala asks Lady Colin if the appetizing meat that pleases her taste comes from the horn of a twin lion, and Lady Colin's face lights up with a smile, impressed by Tala's accurate guess, which she got right on the first try. Colin praises Tala's gastronomic intuition, confirming that the meat is indeed from the horn of a twin lion, specifically a steak from an adult female. Among the 9 horned creatures, adult females are especially valued for their meat, rich in elemental and powerful magical elements that permeate their bodies. Harry proudly adds that Rusty hunted the beast, showing that he is a skilled alchemist. After enjoying the steak, Tala was served a refreshing glass of cold ale, like the first bite of a juicy steak. The first sip of this drink transports her to another dimension. She describes the ale as wonderful and is impressed by its smooth aftertaste. Tala never imagined that in such a remote place she would find such exquisite cold beer. Smiling, she says she should have expected such quality from the Collins estate. Colin proudly says that such exceptional food and drinks are the merit of a unique magical item created by Rusty, which enhances every dish served. While the conversation continues, Colin feels a slight pang of jealousy seeing the connection between Tala and Rust. Here she asks about Tala's earlier meeting with Rust. Tala confidently explains that she seeks revenge on the shaman who harmed her comrades. She says that she found a clue in alchemy and brought it to Rusty for analysis. Colin nods, acknowledges Rust's skill as an alchemist. The warm atmosphere, possibly due to the cold ale, prompts Tala to talk about the past and her desire to honor fallen allies. Under the bright moonlight, Tala's heart glows as she recalls the past. 2 years ago in the Temple of Erasure of the Turnip Guild, a girl named Sheila happily showed Lady Knight Tala a doll in a newly sewn outfit. Sheila, who made it herself, wanted to share her success with Tala, who had given her the doll. Tola praised Sheila's sewing, delighting her with the equipment. Someone asked if Tala was going to the city. Tala was indeed planning to go for usual shopping. Sheila asked for a cute ribbon for the doll. Before leaving, a friend of Holly's Forsha came. Asks for Albert's liver and promises Al after her return. The church in the forest outside the city required regular trips for provisions, and that day Tala was in charge of it. With a long list, she planned to start early. Parish Chief Cilia Manning approached Tala. Be aware of the shopping plans, and noticed that they had few medicinal herbs, so it was time to replenish the supplies. Silly smile. Advised Talon not to overtrain, because getting injured alone would be risky. Tala's Celia was like a mother. She was respected for kindness and insight. She noticed everything. Silly blessed Holly for a safe journey, and Holly set off on her daytime trip. Returning to the present time, Tala asks Colin about the three faces of the goddess Erisli, and Colin correctly names them as love, wisdom, and revenge, which pleases Tala. Tola recalls how she was taught love and revenge, and this extended her training. When she returned from shopping, it was already dark. Tragically, while she was away, a shaman attacked the church. Tala recalls feeling late after getting the ribbon and rare ingredients. She hoped Celia would not be too upset. Approaching the church, Tala noticed a bright light over the hill and saw that the church was on fire. She saw the lifeless body of Sheila in the middle of the fire. Tears were rolling. She mourned the painful death in duels. The assembly hall, where the fire likely started, was lit from outside. The flame flickers through the broken windows. In shock, Tala reached for the sword, but froze and could not act. She still feels guilty for doing nothing. When the fire went out with the sunrise, Tala first recognized Silly by the body. Although Silly was badly burned, his kind smile remained even in death. When Tala tried to hold her, the shaman's curse activated, and Tala became angry. The shaman desecrated Celia's body, using her status as a beloved to curse everyone who approached. Tala never managed to get rid of the shame for her failure. The cursed bruises on her face showed the disgrace she felt towards Celia. She believed that others deserved a longer life than she did. Calm her down and sincerely say that you regret having touched such painful memories. Talak the Lady Knight admits that she owes Rusty for lifting the curse. She intends to give him her sword when the revenge is complete, and Colin fully understands her determination. Welcoming Talha to her domains, he assures her that she will always be warmly received here. Encouragement from Tala to address her by name. Meanwhile, the master alchemist feels thirsty after several hours of transformations. Arya comes with food and drinks and asks him to take a break. Having reached his goal, Rusty happily takes a break and eats standing up. His faithful friend Iri brings chairs for comfort. Rusty apologizes to Iri for the inconvenience, sipping ice that soothes his throat. Iri says that Leitna brewed ale for the welcome banquet. Leitna was proud to have perfected the drink, constantly experimenting since he started riding horses. Rusty considers the ale exceptional. Its unique aroma hints at the use of plant ingredients of a monstrous type. He understands that Leitna is not only responsible for food supplies, but also prepares wonderful drinks. Eric recalls Leitna's joy when a barley monster, which he tracked, broke into their holdings. Rusty looks at the dish, a steak with 2 horns. Although it has been served before, this is the first time it is served as a thick piece. He praises the camp cooks for constantly making dishes vibrant, even with ordinary ingredients. Variety and preparation make the dishes interesting. Iri says that food is one of the main highlights in their remote location. Then she changes the subject and asks Rusty if he has noticed special abilities that she and her sister have. Rusty confirms that he suspected as much when they set up an ambush on the outer camp. He suggests that Rohan might be able to see from afar or through objects. An NAC Ari points to the associated power to assess strength. Iri confirms that he is mostly right. Rowan has farsighted and insightful vision. Even Eric can glance into the future for a moment. Rusty admires their abilities. Magical eyes are rare. But the future place seems mythical. Iri downplays her gift. Explain that it activates only during potential conflicts and gives a few seconds of foresight. Rusty asks if she is familiar with his fighting style. He notices her face covered with fabric and imagines her smiling as if she knows everything, and tells her not to answer, instead of asking if she is comfortable sharing so much about her powers. Harry explains that her trust comes from his past actions and helping others, so she trusts him. Showing a napkin near her face, she says this is what she wants to talk about. Rusty guesses that it is a magical item that serves as a seal because he has sharp intuition. It is necessary to check if she needs to repair the fabric. He explains that these magical items were created to restrain their power from getting out of control, but their effectiveness is weakening. Rusty understands that their powers are still growing. Instead of repairing the fabric, he suggests creating 2 new magical items and says that it will probably take time. Eri thanked the alchemist for his generosity and promised to repay him. But he refused any compensation, considering everyone as family. Praising her dishes, he decided to return to his current affairs and assured her that he would check his sister's clothes tomorrow. He left, lost in thoughts about returning to the magical crystals. The next day, Zala was delighted when the alchemist reported that he had transformed all the crystals overnight. Ross asked if the salt could bring them all back. The amazing act left no doubt, so he began managing the load of the mules. He praised the alchemist and acknowledged his exceptional skills. Then Ross went to pick up an important person who was with them. The mammals soon returned with the mammals, a civilian official from the Dominion Dalton who seemed to oversee the deal. Nemels was surprised to see that a pile of Hazure fruits had turned into magical crystals overnight. He sat down with Colin to discuss payment. Rusty news about the village head, likely preparing his feudal lord for the deal. Suspecting that the alchemist would complete the task overnight, Rusty noticed that Mammal's feather was a magical tool that used enchanted elements to protect important documents from forgery and unauthorized changes. Moreover, the seal used by the mammals was also a magical item. Rusty noticed that the amount on the parchment was twice the budget allocated last year to the basic research department. The mammals handed the payment check to Colin, and he accepted it. The official asked to pay the part related to Rust according to the contract. Colin announced the creation of the Dominion Department of Alchemical Research, which she would personally lead, and appointed Rusty as its head, catching the alchemist by surprise. Although he agreed, his decision was reacted to. Colin added that as long as the funding for the new department comes from the profits of selling magical crystals minus Russell's share. The master alchemist smiled because he knew that opening a new department was not easy, and he thought about the paperwork troubles the mammals would face, almost setting the official against himself. Meanwhile, Colin informed the mammals that they would deliver the crystals to their destinations, including his own holdings, as agreed. The mammals were satisfied and promised to smoothly organize the logistics. He intends to effectively use strategic resources. Rusty noticed that colonels rarely plot anything, so it was easier for him to let 2 officials decide the details. Before leaving, he approached Rusty and congratulated him on the new role. She wanted to see how he would cope, and he decided to pursue the shaman using the information he himself provided. The knight said goodbye, wished him success, and left. Rusty watched her leave, quietly wishing her victory in her quest for revenge before returning to Colin. According to Lady Rose, his duties will hardly change. He will continue to work on footwear on campus using alchemy, transform magical crystals, and conduct basic research. But he needed to prioritize research in his role. Colin emphasized that he could freely manage the budget, within reason if he has reported all expenses. She imagined that the department would become an independent unit with a larger staff, and asked him to suggest a name for it. Rusty begins to think about the name of the new department. I desire something unique from the Association of Alchemists. He thinks about names related to the Admiralty Dominion or to his alchemical work. Realizing that he will not choose immediately, he focuses again on his affairs. When 2 sisters outside his tent call and say that they have come, the sister goes inside, and Rusty says he wants to check them because of what Ari said earlier. He remembers that during her last visit Roan often inspected the tent, probably studying Rose together with her Magikai. That he considers an interesting ability. Rusty orders the ranks to form 2 chairs for them. He then approaches the sisters to study the flow of magical elements in their eyes and the role of the magical fabric that restrains their powers. At first, he asks them to wrap their eyes with a sealing scroll to completely block their magical sight. During this, he plans to conduct a basic check of their magical clothing. Eri nervously asks who should go first, and Rusty is not surprised. They know the anxiety arises from the risk of removing a magical item they constantly wear on their face. The alchemist suggests starting with a strike on the row. When Eri's Magikai exerts more pressure on her body, he gives Eri a scroll and explains how to wrap it around Rohit's head to cover her eyes. As soon as the scroll was securely closed, Rusty sealed it, and Rohit's sight plunged into complete darkness. He is confident the scroll is intact and asks Eri to remove her sister's magical item. Eri agrees, and Rusty orders the privates to bring the magical element tester. This device emits weak magical fields to check magical items. Checking if the magical stone is intact, places the fabric on the table to examine its source of magic. That is concentrated in the center of Roke's forehead. When she puts it on him, Rusty uses a pendulum to measure the flow of magical elements and considers the structure of the magical fabric quite simple. He detects a buffer and an amplifier on the fabric, considering them somewhat superfluous. The functions can be significantly improved, and he suspects that the alchemist who created this item was probably mediocre. Rusty could embed several of his magical circuits and immediately create a much better item. He doubts whether the first alchemist was close to the sisters and hesitates about how much to tell. Looking at the sisters, he is relieved to see that Rowan has relaxed. He returns the magical item to Eri and asks her to put it on Rohit's face again. Rusty then begins to remove the seal and takes Rohit's hand and initiate the exchange protocol to improve the item's performance. After that, he asks Rohan to keep the scroll in case it is needed. He doubts whether he was mistaken, but Rohit's reassuring words confirm the success of the experiment and relieve his anxiety. The alchemist finishes reviewing the sisters and thinks about creating 2 new magical items for them. Although he knows they are better than the current ones, he is not sure if he should give them away. He understands that if he provides new items, he will have to replace the old ones. Special abilities are rare, and much about them is still unknown. He worries that psychological influence might disrupt their control. If the goal is simply to support their powers, the old items might turn out to be better. It is a difficult choice, and he thinks about creating a device to measure and compare their skill in controlling magic. Separately, Rusty feels that his recent research has stalled due to routine tasks and a limited budget at his previous job. Having received a budget, Rusty thinks about a new approach instead of just increasing productivity. He thinks about creating items that can be fully turned on or off, with short periods of automatic control. He considers whether it is worth reversing the formula and applying it in a different context. It might give the desired result. Later, he approaches Rohit, who was waiting, and tells her that he made 2 new magical items for her. He shows 2 pairs of glasses, which initially confuses the sisters because they do not know how to use them. He shows how to put on the glasses and asks them to undress. The sisters are happy to clearly see each other's faces and feel refreshed thanks to the glasses. Rusty praises them and says the glasses suit both perfectly. Eri is initially a little shy as she gets used to the new item. But Rusty continues to explain how they work. He starts with the Rhodex glasses, which seem to fit well. He explains that if you push them up her nose, they will switch to sealing power mode. Veslov checks how the glass works until it is completely satisfied. Rusty takes them to the armored summit, where sounds massively flowed against the current since Apollo defeated the boss Panda. Roan strikes the salmon with 1 precise hit, a skill that even Colin cannot match. It is necessary to find out if she has any problems with this subject. But Rowan is quite satisfied with her glasses. She can finally control her magical eyes and see the world brightly. Rowan notes that in the new glasses, the transition between transparency mode and long-distance vision mode is smooth. However, she mentions one drawback. Although she finds voice control useful, she preferred touch control. She also suggests using the left hand for control because it will be more practical. She holds the spear in her right hand. Rusty accepts her remark and immediately takes the glasses to adjust them. He rewrites the magical scheme, transferring all controls to the left side. He returns the improved glasses to Rohit, who gladly puts them on and starts happily dancing around the pond. Ari and Rusty smile at her, while the armored salmon perfectly lands on her spear. Obviously, the older sister used her magical eye, predicted the salmon jump, and knocked it down. Rusty wonders whether her magic works outside of battle, or if she saw a future where he accidentally revealed his thoughts. Harry tells him that he is not entirely wrong. Meanwhile, Realism looks angry because the president of the association orders him to find Russell. All departments have problems with the quality of the main materials, which leads to failures or delays in transmutations. Buyers now demand compensation for missed deadlines and poor quality materials. The president reminds Realism of his earlier statement that Russell's departure would not matter, and now wonders how he will explain the current crisis. The president criticizes Realism for tarnishing the association's reputation and not filling the void left by Russell. Their buildings have large holes from the explosion, and the stench is still noticeable. Despite these problems, Realism remains against Rusty's return, believing that their sales without him broke records and hoping for a recent delivery of magical crystals. The president interrupts and instructs Realism to compensate for Russell's absence. If Realism fails, the president threatens to make him personally retrieve Russell. Realism reluctantly agrees and blames Rusty for the chaos, as he did before. Returns to the Army Alchemy Department. Other alchemists immediately notice his gloomy mood. Salazar then comes in with grim news, a review. The feeling that most of the newly sent magical crystals of the new style have been returned. Realism's anger intensifies as he checks the returned cargo. He demands details about the payment and instructs Todd to contact the wholesalers. And she comes in and asks what to do with the returned crystals, which are an important source of income. Realism orders Todd to go to the warehouse, clear out all the items there to free up space, put the returned cargo there, and at the same time find out where it was supposed to be sent. The alchemists hesitate, unsure whether to throw away items that look old, but they have no other choice. They go to the storage rooms and start tidying up to free up space. Skinny notices old wooden boxes and thinks they contain outdated equipment from the former Fundamental Research Department, which he considers unimportant. She finds a colorless transparent liquid in one box and considers it a useless potion. Tortora suggests throwing everything into the river without checking if it is real, hoping to avoid further angering his boss. The alchemists begin work, and Skinny borrows a transmuted beast to carry wooden boxes to the river. These boxes contain concentrated solutions of magical elements that Rusty often used in his early research. Fortunately, the magical elements are safe for humans, so dumping them into the river will not cause immediate harm. However, since there is no visible harm, no one will notice what Tall and others have done until it is too late. The consequences may not appear immediately, and their long-term effects are unknown. It seems Russell's actions angered the fat, corrupt master, which strongly resembles the irrational math teacher one might recall from school. In the communication room of the Alchemists Association, chaos reigns. Salazar holds a paper and looks puzzled as he reads it. Suddenly, Master Realism bursts through the door and scares the unfortunate worker before he can respond. Realism quickly approaches and grabs the paper from his hands. His deeply furrowed brow shows complete confusion. It turns out that old magical crystals are scattered around, and there are quite a few of them. Realism raises the alarm as if he cannot believe it. Import has been completely stopped due to these old magical crystals, and Realism suspects that some association member might be smuggling them in, but it seems unlikely. Any alchemist who betrays the association is immediately expelled. An unlicensed alchemist could not have pulled off such a scheme. Soon Realism will piece everything together and recall Russell's departure from the association. He suspects that Rusty might be behind this, but clients are returning new-style magical crystals, and at this rate, the association risks accumulating unsold stock. Realism asks another alchemist about sales, and it turns out they have improved slightly. But overall, the association's prospects remain bleak. Realism is now angry. He is sure that Rusty is in control of everything, and if this is true, Realism will have to swallow his pride and ask Rusty to return, but his ego is obviously too big to accept such a possibility. A woman at the door tells Realism that the boss is calling him and looks angry. Realism will continue to pursue Rusty for some time, but for going into the forest with some suspicious people who are sneaking through dense thickets. Sunlight reflects off Realism's bald head, shining like a lonely moon. His eyes full of tears gleam with disappointment, but it seems he is powerless to change anything now. The boss called Realism and ordered him to bring Rusty back to the association. This task is unpleasant to the old stubborn man, but he has no other choice, so he carries out the boss's direct order. Realism paid out of his own pocket to hire several rough-looking thugs who were supposed to join him on the trek through the forest to retrieve Russell. His judgment seems questionable because the hired men appear weak and incompetent like him. However, it is better than going alone. One lawbreaker doubts the route, but reality still breaks through him. They insist they are on the right path. It turns out that instead of taking Russell, these fools plan to kill an unsuspecting alchemist, which is a big failure for them. Russell, the hero of the story, does not give up so easily. the group carries magical schemes from the association, created to change elements, which they plan to use as weapons against Russell. Realism says Rusty must be completely burned. His cruel desires are doomed to fail. He devised a plan and ordered his people to lure Rusty into a trap that attracts monsters so they would devour him. It is a vile plan. Distorted realism fuels the group's greed because they believe Russell, probably a source of magical crystals, is rich. They eagerly plan to share the loot, assuming the scheme will succeed. The group arrogantly believes they can eliminate Russell. Realism mocks Rusty as a fool for going into a remote area full of beasts and says his death will be his own fault. His logic is as tangled as complex chemistry. Moreover, Realism does not respect the boss, who prefers clean operations. He shouts to his group that many local monsters are sensitive to sounds. They plan to use this for 6,000 creatures on Russell. In an unexpected turn, the loud cry of Realism attracts a sound-sensitive creature that attacks from behind, but it is only a small, seemingly warm creature that the group easily overcomes. The approach of thousands of monsters signifies serious danger, so it is ordered to use magical chains, as the elemental change has consumed too much magical energy. Stubborn mercenaries ignore his wise advice to Annette to hit the targets, and soon they exhaust their magical crystals. They ask Realism to give spare crystals and weapons, but he has nothing. Cowards flee, leaving the realists alone with the threat. Betrayal hurts. But as a member of the association, he has decent skills. He begins to fight the monster alone, casts spells, and breaks the worm-like creatures. Realism holds against the relentless swarms of monsters. Strangely, his transmuted pike, the only means of attack, the parasitic fat of Garber, is stuck in his body, and this is a critical flaw in his alchemy. Because of this inefficiency, he fears the fight. Unfortunately, having no other means to fight, he is forced to struggle for survival. Real relentlessly destroys monsters one by one. He throws spores that draw life from fierce creatures, and from their remains grow living mushrooms that quickly tear flesh and kill them. Standing amid a huge pile of monsters he has killed, Realism is forced to acknowledge the harsh truth that even more monsters are approaching. He continues to fight, though the attacks do not cease. Having no choice between battle and death, he goes through the bodies of monsters. One of them sneaks up and bites him cruelly. The pain is so strong that it reminds him of ancestors who fought the enemy. His face looks tired, with deep features of rage. The face is badly wounded, but he manages to kill the worm that attacked him. Kneeling on one knee, leaning on the other leg, he examines the wounds and wonders if the potion can heal him. And around the landscape, strewn with the corpses of monsters he killed with alchemy and sprouted mushrooms, looks eerie. After recovering from the clash, Realism gets up and approaches Russell. He shouts that Rusty is to blame for his recent suffering. Swearing revenge, he plans to lure Rusty back into the association, then ambush and destroy him at the peak of joy. His insidious plan is doomed to fail because events will unfold that way. Burdened by a heavy build, Realism slowly moves forward, resolutely searching for Rusty across the wide expanses. Meanwhile, Rusty enjoys a peaceful moment with his faithful companion Hippo, performing an important alchemical task: extraction of magical elements from the soil for cultivation. High concentrations of magical elements hinder plant growth and can even turn them into monsters if planted in such soil, so alchemists have to extract and release these elements into the air. Rusty digs holes in the cracked, powdery soil, large enough for his hand to fit in. The soil is hard to dig, but Rusty finishes the work. Hippo, his faithful horse, is curious. Rusty suggests digging in turns, and Hippo readily agrees. Rusty steps back, letting Hippo dig. Impressed by Hippo's skill, Rusty shows him the spots marked by Mark, and the work quickly finishes. Rusty moves on to the next step and carries transformed bolts to extract magical elements. Hippo wants to help, but Russell, seeing the complexity of the task for his four-legged friend, does it himself. Having made sure there are no leaks, he begins the spell and initiates the redirection of the magical element. And the bolts start working, drawing magic from the earth, while Rusty watches to not pull out more than he can bear, because it could backfire and cause harm. Looking at the pendant on his left wrist, he remembers when it was given to him. The talisman from his hometown was Ari's way of thanking Rusty for the magical thing he gave her. Rusty asks if she knows about the charm and the light blush. She explains that the charm can be cut. Rusty is glad to learn that it is from Rohan, but wonders why the ability to cut it makes it special. Returning to the present, Rusty stops to rest, leaning on the hippopotamus. The spell will last some time, so he decides to read the predecessor's article to keep himself occupied. He takes out a study comparing the concentrations of magical elements in the soil and in the plants that grew in it. He recalls that before leading the Alchemists Association, he transcribed all the papers of the basic research department onto a scroll. He was sure that Realism and others would reject them. However, Rusty immerses himself in the predecessor's paper, absorbed by its conclusions. It states that if a little magical element is left in the soil, food becomes tastier for people. According to the theory, the brain mistakenly perceives magical ingredients in food as enhanced flavor, although the actual taste does not change. Russell's research studies how magical elements affect the human body, and this article provides useful conclusions. The article contains interesting remarks about his work. The hippopotamus Rusty Ponder informs him, and he notices that the task is almost complete. Rusty stands up and checks the concentration, making sure it is perfect. He praises Hippo for monitoring the soil and reporting it on time. But before he can move on, Harry runs up from afar and warns that someone has come to see him and it might be a problem. Rusty wonders if it is someone troublesome. He asks Eerie if the visitor identified himself. Sweating, Eerie confirms his realism. It seems the fall of Realism is about to unfold. Rusty thinks about why Realism came to see him, recalling his academic years filled with anxiety, but he decides to return to the community to meet the unexpected guest, and on the way asks Eerie to tell more. Rusty Nance Hippo extends his hand to Eerie. She hesitates at first, feels shy and insecure, but eventually grabs his hand and sits down. Rusty tells her to hold on tight because he is going to speed up to return quickly. Eerie finds the trip exciting and strangely comfortable, perhaps because she is sitting behind a passionate, promising young man like Russell, and although the wasteland has rough terrain, it seems to her that Hippo adjusts the speed to keep them safe. Or maybe Rusty equit Tipo with expensive Fox shock absorbers for his forelegs. Rusty says that Realism is a former colleague from the Alchemists Association, known for causing trouble, and he imagines him with a white expression on his face. He begins to gather facts and suspects that Realism's visit is related to problems with the magical crystal. The realization chills him as he prepares for the upcoming confrontation. Noticing Eris's discomfort, Rusty gently asks if everything is okay. At first, the kind woman admits she cannot see the future clearly. But she feels that a grim confrontation is approaching, which seems like a real war. Eerie says her vision flickers and this intensifies her fear, and Rusty asks about the monocle he gave her, curious about its function. Eerie promptly replies that the magical item, which Rusty forged for her, works flawlessly, and thanks to the special monocle, she now notices signs of the approaching battle and can prepare for future trials. Rusty is surprised that Eerie answered his question even before he managed to fully ask it. Let's assume the monocle works perfectly. He then asks if she means that he and Realism will clash in the future. Harry confirms that it is almost certain. But she adds that it is not just a fight. Her instincts suggest that something deeper is brewing, although she finds it hard to explain because she has never felt this way before. Feeling shy, Ari withdraws from the conversation. Rusty pays no attention to her departure. Thank her for the valuable ideas. While Hippo struggles through the rough terrain, Harry grows increasingly worried, her thoughts heavy with the sense of an approaching decisive moment related to Russell's choice. She knows that this turning point, where the best and worst outcomes weigh equally, is near. Eerie imagines her fate unraveling. She sees two men facing each other in a barren wasteland, where the presence of a shaman is felt. Noticing Eerie's anxiety, Rusty looks around. Her eyes glow with magic, showing that her perception has sharpened. The monocle operates at full power and is tuned to her magical sight. This vision of the future exceeds Russell's expectations and makes him admire her strength. Lost in anxious thoughts, he almost slipped absent-mindedly. But Rusty quickly supports her and asks her to hold on. Eerie, relieved, thanks him and says she is fine. Rusty notices that her future sight has stopped working. You realize that the strain from her magical eye is greater than you thought. Rusty promises to protect everyone, no matter what fate may be, and calls Eerie his family. We leave the nature of their bonds undefined, not like brothers or sisters, but perhaps deeper. For the family narrative, we leave it to the imagination. With a determined smile, Rusty tells Eerie to hold tight because he is going to speed up. Hippo, his faithful horse, rushes forward on 4 strong legs and quickly reaches the camp. Eerie leads Rusty to the place where Realism is. She has a keen sense. She mourns in the ominous aura emanating from Realism, and makes Rusty wonder if it is connected to her ability to become transparent. As they approach, he notices Lady Colin nearby. He politely apologizes to Colin for their delay, then heads toward the hostile, almost beastly reality. Dealing with a master of alchemy like Realism is a serious challenge, especially for Colin, who is stronger in physical combat than in alchemy. Rusty understands that fighting realism alone might be too difficult for her. With determination in his eyes, Rusty gathers everyone and takes the lead, approaching realism. He dramatically pinches his nose and jokes that something smells, hinting at realism's presence. The master alchemist responds with equal contempt, though reluctantly, gritting his teeth and preparing for confrontation. While pushed by his intrigues, realism announces that the Alchemists Association is restoring the basic research department. And the president offered Rusty a chance to return. Realism extends his hands as if offering friendship and asks Rusty if he is glad for the opportunity to return to the Alchemists Association. His tone reveals insincerity. Rusty senses hidden hostility and responds briefly to the offer. He clearly states that he left the association by his own choice and did so consciously, acknowledges that the closure of the basic research department influenced his decision, but now finds meaning and opportunities outside the association. Rusty sharply tells Realism that if he came only for this, he can leave, and Realism's pseudo-composer breaks down. He emits a rough animal howl, not tears, but a primal burst of anger and frustration, a chilling sound that tenses Russell, Colin, Erie, and Rogan and forces them to take defensive positions. Preparing for Realism's next move. When his plans fall apart, Realism's behavior completely changes. He declares that there is no choice left and begins to activate his alchemy, his eyes shining with menace, promising to kill everyone present. Tension rises. Rusty and his allies prepare for the upcoming battle and must unite against a formidable enemy, while Rusty calmly explains that alchemists' fights to the death are forbidden. And it could have cost him his qualification. Unmoved, Realism smiles, radiating confidence in his skills, and arrogantly says he can defeat Russell, the main hero, and end the story right there. Rusty notices that Realism is dispersing spores from his mouth and calls everyone to retreat, warning that transmuted creatures resembling slimy fungus can be deadly if inhaled. The spores soon grow limbs, look harmless, but are likely saturated with Realism's poisonous elements. Rusty decides to neutralize them all at once. He takes out his magical tool, a small white wand, which he recognizes from his work on magical crystals. Rusty launches a tornado at full power, aimed at Realism's spores. It needs to be told to Realism that he is only a secondary character. He is not the villain of this story when the clash between him and Rusty intensifies. Russell's tornado sweeps away Realism's dangerous mushrooms. Not knowing what these transformed beasts are, Rusty carefully cuts them into small pieces to avoid surprises, and Colin, Erie, and Rohan smile confidently, their faith in Russell's masterful alchemy unshaken. Extremely cautious, Rusty decides to relocate the mushrooms away from the camp to protect the civilians. This sharply contrasts with Realism, the corrupted alchemist hired by the flawed system, whose negligence reflects the harsh truth of many worlds. Realism looks in shock, face empty, while Russell's tornado turns his mushrooms to dust. Crushed mushrooms swirl in a tornado column and form a grotesque mass resembling a smoothie. The disgusting sight holds Realism's gaze, his eyes full of sorrow, because his beloved creations are turning into vile sludge. The tornado soon engulfs him, covering him and the disgusting remains of his mushrooms. Meanwhile, Russell's friend cheered from the side, and the events unfolded too quickly for them to keep track. Angry and humiliated, Realism quickly gets to his feet and frantically tries to wipe off the sticky mushroom slime clinging to him. He groans in pain, reaching for his mushrooms, but the slimy mass slips from his fingers, as do his fading chances to defeat Russell. In agony, he demands to know how Rusty could destroy his precious mushrooms. Someone has to get him out of this state. This is a fight, and Rusty has no emotional connection to those creepy mushrooms, unlike Realism. Rusty and his friend exchanged glances over Realism's ridiculous tantrum, and quickly gathering himself, Realism uses a manifest scroll to summon a giant mushroom that releases thick air around. Rusty laughs, calling it a smoke screen, and mocks Realism, who is fleeing from the fight he provoked, but the gas, heavier than air, quickly settles and creates a new threat. As expected, the coward runs away. Rusty and his comrades are surprised and do not understand why Realism appeared at all. Colin shouts to chase after him, but Rusty stops them and warns that the released gas may be toxic, despite his unstable actions. The fact that Realism is a master of alchemy still poses a serious threat. Rusty quickly applies alchemy to purify the air and isolate the poison. The air around them distorts slightly, a sign that Rusty is separating the gases. As he already said, this alchemy requires great concentration. He carefully forms each gas into a separate bubble, and one of them contains pure oxygen. Using a sunbeam, Rusty ignites the oxygen bubble, causing it to descend. just enough to cause a burst of thermal energy. Then he carefully catches the potentially poisonous purple smoke in a jar so it cannot cause harm. Returning to his friends, Rusty says he strives for realism, but Roget, thanks to his sharp telescope, notices something troubling. She shouts for Rusty to hide behind them, and everyone looks to the horizon, where a swarm of faded armored salmons rushes at them in frenzy. These creatures recently evolved, charge in a crowd. Rusty questions the strange coincidence of timing. They hesitated whether to fight them or choose a realistic approach. Colin takes command and directs Rowan and Eri to the front line to hold back the creatures and simultaneously assess their combat capability. She takes a position to control the battle and evacuate civilians. After ordering everyone to prioritize survival, Colin returns to Russell as Master Rust and promises their full support, whether he strives for realism or continues to fight. Rusty pauses to weigh the options, his instincts pushing towards realism. He wonders if this is the fateful moment predicted by Rowan. He stands before a crucial choice, to chase realism or stay to help Colin while others fend off the monsters. Drops of sweat appear on Russell's face. He feels the weight of the decision. He knows Colin and the rest are fighting flying enemies, and these armored flying monsters with tough scales. They could overpower them without proper equipment or alchemy. The fight will likely become entirely defensive, with a high risk of human casualties. If realism breaks out, it will create another serious problem. Fights between alchemists are forbidden because their unleashed power can destroy the environment. They endanger not only themselves, but also nearby civilians, which can have serious consequences, so alchemist duels to the death are strictly regulated. Rusty knows that if realism gets out of control, the damage could be much greater than the current threat. If realism retreats and returns stronger, the danger could increase exponentially. Colin realizes the risk and prioritizes protecting the camp and civilians. She nevertheless entrusts the decision to Russell, confident that he will choose correctly at this decisive moment. After thinking, Rusty says that he will stay in the camp rather than chase realism. Looking at Colin, he sees the great responsibility she bears. If sacrifices occur during his pursuit of realism, Colin, as the camp leader, will bear the sorrow and regret herself. He knows that she will hide her emotional fatigue. Rusty realizes that his duty is to stay here and save those who rely on him. Realism, with a confident smile, says that he can be dealt with later if he returns. Colin feels a surge of relief upon learning that Rusty will stay and fight alongside them. His decision strengthens her resolve, and she feels a surge of strength as they prepare together for the threat. Rusty prepares to confront the celestial salmon, standing firm and surveying the sky. Suddenly, Eri sharply says that Rusty must strive for realism, but Collins quickly interrupts her, confirming her authority and insisting that they follow her orders. Eri reluctantly agrees and says they will do it once they are out of Colin's sight. Rusty quietly apologizes to Eri, trying to find the words. Deep inside, he doubts the future predicted by Eri. Thinking about his past, he realizes that he has quietly become passive. Now he was given a chance to influence the future thanks to Colin's trust and hope and the camp. Rusty decided to defend what they gave him. He raises his eyes and sees how the celestial salmons have split into two groups, one flying to the capital, the other descending to the camp. Rusty looks unsure if it is good news or bad, because something in the capital can affect everyone, and uncertainty weighs on him as he prepares for battle. Rusty calls Eri and Rohit and asks where the non-military people are. They answer that they are being taken to the food storeroom. A smart move. Armed with this, Rusty rushes to the camp to gather all the chemical supplies, wasting no time, utters the spell, and quickly transmutes using his best materials. Usually he can provide resources using them as efficiently as possible. But these things are too valuable, and he knows he will not be able to replace them. It is worth saving the people of the camp. It is a small price. Rusty works hard to keep everything clean. Rapid changes anxiously exhaust him. Alchemy requires sharp concentration, like threading a needle, and simultaneously managing several chemical processes seems too difficult. For a moment, he feels himself being drawn into unconsciousness. Still, Rusty gathers strength, overcomes fatigue, and completes the spell. He prepares scrolls to resist enemies in the sky, having created a total of 9 schools. When everything is ready, he steps out, hoping that everyone still stands firm before the approaching threat. When Rusty leaves the camp, he raises his head and sees Colin cutting his way through flying salmons and her smooth black full armor. He is impressed not only by her strength but also by her finesse. Considering the difficulties of youth, it becomes clear why Colin earned the title of warrior here. She is much stronger than most people, although she does not look bulky. Her heavy full armor and huge sword compensate for that, allowing her to dominate the battlefield with her skill and strength. Noticing Rusty, Colin hurried to him and asked if everything was ready. Rusty nodded in confirmation and looks around the battlefield a little. He notices that Colin could handle it alone, but she shakes her head. Pointing to the monster eggs scattered around, she says she couldn't handle them alone and asks Rusty to take care of them. Rusty says that all the monsters must be destroyed at once. He takes out all the prepared scrolls and begins to read the spell, activating them all simultaneously. If Rusty wanted to destroy the monsters, he would use polished scrolls, but their use in the camp would cause great harm, so he chooses manifestation scrolls. The monsters lunged at Rusty with frightening speed, moving as one. But they instantly disappear. Rusty uses a strange chemical mixture to either hide the monsters or completely destroy them. Eri and Roy stand in the labyrinth while Rusty explains. This is the practical application of manifestation. The scrolls use a return function to send parts of the monsters to another dimension and then bring them back to a different place. And although this is a strange and complex idea, their determined confidence complicates doubts. The fight ended thanks to one move by Rust. He notices that these celestial salmons are much larger than the armored salmons he had encountered before. From what he sees, he concludes that their advanced fins help these formidable creatures maintain balance during flight, and their heart scales seem to contain magical elements. Rusty thinks that Sem absorbed magical energy from the air for dynamic lift, and this idea fascinates him. Soon he sets out to destroy the monster, easing Colin's burden. He begins handing out scrolls. In this moment of calm, we see Leitna, a diligent man who sometimes is responsible for the food storage, sometimes cooks, and sometimes argues with the team. Leitna is busy caring for the fallen bees, but their number seems endless. A skilled warrior from the Harkness Battle Corps calls him Commander Lieutenant and suggests acting as bait to tactically attack the flying salmon. But Leitnu refuses, saying that their circular formation should not be broken. Leitna throws an axe at the salmon, showing his determination. Martinez looks at him, waiting for further orders. The terrible creatures seem endless. Leitner says that Lady Colin ordered them not to retreat. He fully trusts her despite the difficult circumstances. He tells Harkness that they have come this far trusting Colin and will continue to do so, and Leitna asks everyone to hold on and lifts their spirits. Although secretly he thinks they should soon find an opportunity to retreat, he again trusts Lady Colin and continues the fight. Then what happened shocked everyone. They stood stunned with open mouths as a monstrous creature appeared, eating the salmon as they rushed toward Leitna. He raises his weapon and tells everyone to be alert, but soon it becomes clear that they no longer need to fight. The salmon continue to break apart and fall apart amid the chaos, and Leitna suspects that Russell's alchemy is behind this. The salmon immediately scattered in different directions, although their weapons had no effect. This is simply the incredible power of Rusty teams. No, if you asked Rust, he would probably start boringly explaining that knowledge is power in chemistry. Sorry, alchemy allowed him to achieve this. Leitner asks the young man with long hair for a report on losses and injuries, and is relieved to learn that there were only 12 minor injuries and no deaths. However, Harkness again calls Leitner a commander, which clearly annoys him. Leitner has said 1,000 times that he is no longer a commander, but people still perceive him as one. Harkness looks a bit depressed and asks Leitner if they are really no longer needed, and Leitner thinks for a moment and calls him a fool. If they had not managed to evacuate the civilians, and if the salmon had broken through immediately, there would have been heavy losses. No matter how you look at it, the fighters are vital for this battle. It is unwise to focus on their shortcomings. It seems that Leitner's sincere words touched Harkness, known for his strictness and seriousness. Leitner says that without each person, a flawless defense is impossible. While Leitner is speaking, someone reports that the mules are under attack. He quickly gathers 2 or 3 people to join him and hurries forward to deal with the remaining enemies. Meanwhile, Harkness thinks that Leitner is a true commander not because of his official rank, but thanks to wise leadership and unwavering determination. But at the same time, Leitner makes a desperate attempt to escape from Rust. He screams from pain and torment, the suffering he inflicted on himself. His pride was hurt, and perhaps this is his only true concern. He wonders how everything turned out so badly, but anger does not let him take responsibility for his failure. Instead, he fully blames Rusty, saying that everything fell apart the moment Rusty appeared in his life. Everything related to Rusty irritates him because memories surface. He remembers the time when he eagerly showed his mother a basket of blooming mushrooms. For him, those mushrooms were fascinating. But his mother considered them disgusting and told him to throw them away before they spread further. The parents of Realism were both talented alchemists and had great hopes for their son. Perhaps it was their excessive pressure and high expectations that destroyed him. It looks like a typical villain story, where controlling parents played a decisive role, and despite obstacles, Wilson moved forward and eventually headed the Army's alchemy department. But when he saw everyone praising young Rusty, his anger exploded. He earned his rank through relentless work, but had to watch a naturally talented person receive the recognition he so desired. Engulfed in thoughts, Realism begins to fall apart, cursing with rusty words, and he swears that all who caused him pain will suffer greatly. He promises to drive them to despair and humiliate everyone. His hatred for Rusty grows stronger. Driven by the belief that everyone considers Rusty better only because of his natural abilities, Realism looks at his knee and notices strange scars that make him panic. He frantically thinks about how these marks appeared there, his head spins, and in despair he drinks several potions. But they do not help. Disappointed, he uses up his entire supply of potions, but nothing gets better. As if his body has become resistant to the very potions he relied on, Realism faces many challenges. Disappointment deepens his despair, thoughts whirl. He decides to return to the association because he knows they will provide quality potions there, and he needs to get to the capital quickly. Resolutely, he reads a spell to summon a parasitic transformed creature named Mixer Meat King. The grotesque monster swallows him. In reality, looks like a hot air balloon in which only his head is visible without a visible lens. This spectacle is both funny and disturbing, conveying the full strangeness of his situation. However, he orders the creature to take him to the capital, and unlike his younger colleagues, the Mixer meets King Abe. He quickly heads to the association. Upon reaching the capital, Realism exits the strange Meat King Mixer and stumbles, but stands on solid ground. Desperately searching for potions, he worries that his artificial appearance might attract unwanted attention from the guards. Walking the streets in torn clothes, he overhears conversations about a recent battle. He becomes curious to find out if he will make it to the next corner, where he will find the Alchemists Association and get the needed potions. At the corner, to his horror, the building where the Association of Alchemists once was now stood in ruins. Realism thinks about his devotion to that place and feels as if everything he worked for is falling apart. At that moment, a shadowy figure wrapped in darkness emerges from the rubble. The stranger creates a barrier, isolates them, and approaches with eerie persistence. The hooded figure carefully studies Realism, noticing his spread. He says that the SAM attack that destroyed the association was accidental, but it was beneficial to him. Confused, Realism asks who he is. The man in the cloak waves it off and calls himself an unimportant person. But thanks to Realism for the faulty magical schemes sent. Before Realism can react, the hooded figure grabs his face and easily lifts him, draining his life force. He praises the demon within himself and says that Realism understands mushroom magic well. With a single finger movement, Realism's wounds ignite and cause him unbearable pain. In a terrifying turn, a figure in a hood transforms reality into a monster before disappearing. In a moment, the crowd gathers around Realism, who is now unconscious. Spores flew from Realism's body, marking his sharp transformation into a monster. The frightened crowd panics and scatters. Realism, barely noticing his surroundings, does not understand why people are fleeing and asks for help. But soldiers arrive, aiming their weapons at him. Chaos erupts as Realism struggles with his new existence. Unaware of the threat he now poses, Captain Harold orders his men to aim at the demon. In an instant, the air fills with gunfire as everyone targets Realism. Unfortunately for Harold, bullets safely ricochet off the alchemist's body, just as the reports had warned. Realism has truly become a demon, and magical bullets are powerless against him. Noticing the situation, Harold quickly calls off the attack. They are already short on men, and if Realism is a demon, even more may be hiding in the Alchemists Association. He orders his troops to arm themselves with magical contours that transform elements into fire with a single focused explosion. Realism desperately tries to convince them that he is still human, not realizing that no one will believe him. Suddenly, the soldiers fire a volley, and Harold watches intently. To his disappointment, he orders his men to stop shooting and instead draw their swords. The plan is simple: charge the demon. Realism, standing before a line of determined soldiers, feels a wave of fear. The thought of what awaits him causes him to panic, and before anyone can approach, he disappears into the sewer. Captain Harold looks suspiciously at the empty spot where the demons stood just a moment ago. Returning to camp, Colin reports on the damage from the sky salmon attacks and the profit expected from the collected magic stones. She says she wants to honor those who stand out, and calls Orion row forward. Colin praises them for quickly assessing the strength of the sky salmon and sharing important details. Despite the risks, she later recognizes Leitna, who tirelessly defended the fighters so that no one was harmed. The efforts of the recently retired medic restrained the lively camp participants and proved that his leadership qualities remained sharp. Finally, Colin praises Rusty for quickly neutralizing the sky salmon and not harming the camp. His actions prevented a catastrophe, and Colin sincerely thanks him. The alchemist is surprised when the entire camp starts applauding him, and the applause echoes. His regret over the escape of realism begins to fade, and instead a small, sincere smile appears. Colin reports that she filed an official complaint to the Alchemists Association due to the attack of realism. She says that probably many saw the celestial salmon attacking the capital, causing great damage to the Alchemists Association. Rusty cannot help but remember his old home. He did not plan to return, but the news about the unrest there touched something in him. Since the royal castle also has problems, he decides not to wait for orders. Instead, they should act now and start distributing magical crystals. Colin agrees, although it means more work for Rast, and Rast is happy about it. He suggested it. After a few days, Colin's camp gathers again, and she reports that the next shipment of Kaguro fruits will arrive soon, and they will focus on building the road to their future. The ruler of the neighboring dominions supports the plan and the colonizers. Details will be agreed upon soon, relying on their constant support. The crowd applauds enthusiastically, then disperses. Later, Rusty finally reaches the tent and feels relieved after a tiring day. On the way, so many people stopped to talk to him that he felt a bit shy and definitely was not used to such attention. He suddenly notices a small animal in his cage. He is stunned because he sees that it now has wings, and its skin has completely shed. He begins to think with surprise that this creature is not a lizard, but a dragon. After all, he has never seen a dragon before. He realizes that the little creature was probably a dragon's offspring, and now does not know what to do next. The little dragon seems hungry, but when Rusty offers it a brick, it immediately pushes it away. Rusty assumes that the dragon might need meat, and recalls that he has some monster leftovers for crafting. Then he notices that the little dragon is looking at the potion, so he decides to try something. With the help of Rose, the alchemist gives the baby dragon a small, safe dose of potion, and to its relief, the dragonling quickly drinks it. Although most creatures like Kippo would find the taste disgusting, Rust is still interested and asks if the little dragon wants more potion, preparing to use the scroll for transcription to check its functionality, just in case. He also asks Rose to watch over the dragon in case something goes wrong. Before reviewing some materials on the subject, when he opens the scroll, he finds no harmful effects, which confuses him. He looks again at the little dragon. I think it's time to give him a name. Later, Rusty joins the commander for lunch and casually mentions that there might be a dragon in his camp. In any case, dragons are mostly mythical, and if this really is a dragon, it would be the first such appearance in many years. The alchemist says he is not entirely sure. He remembers how intelligent the creature seemed when he first saved it, so he thought it might be a dragon. Colin is not convinced and says that refusing grass does not necessarily mean the beast is intelligent. Rusty agrees but says that he plans to further study his intellect. Colin smiles, feels that he has already decided. The alchemist says that he initially thought to free the creature if it is a dragon. He believes that he can establish a connection with it. Colin is confused when Rusty talks about making a contract with the dragon and asks if it is just a fairy tale idea. The alchemist says that fairy tales are mostly fictional, but there is truth in them. Colin wonders if contracts can really exist. Rusty assures her that before any step he will take all necessary safety measures, and Colin approves the experiment. But before Rusty gets too excited, she jokingly insists that she wants to be present when it happens. He smiles and agrees. Knowing that Colin is truly curious, Colin tells him to inform her when he is ready. And Rusty teases others because she is simply interested in the spectacle. Colin happily admits that she is thrilled just by seeing it. Later, Colin comes to the alchemist's tent with Rowan and Ariento. Rusty asks why they are here, and Rohan replies that they are on guard, and it reminds him that she was cautious about the beast from the start, so he begins to think that she probably does not like lizards. Rowan approaches the little creature to get a better look, but Rusty quickly stops her and assures that it is safe. She quietly apologizes. The alchemist notices that there is no usual magical glow in her eyes. It seems her gift of foresight is not working. This means that a fight with the dragonling is unlikely. Rusty tells the sisters to stay behind Hippo. They say that Colin will handle it herself because she is the strongest here. Colin then asks how he plans to make a contract with the dragon. He explains that if it is a real dragon, weak alchemy will not work, and stronger alchemy might harm it. So alchemy is not suitable. He asks the girls if they know about primal magic. Eri says that it is connected with life and uses blood as a medium. Rusty says that his elder studied primal magic and now applies those ideas. His mentor said that ancient legends about people and dragons might be connected to this magic. But the dragon's call interrupts, to prompt Ari to remind her that the alchemist can talk too long if not stopped. Arya apologizes, although she liked his explanation. Knowing they have a task to focus on, Rusty turns to the beast to start the experiment. To ask Rose to open his cage. He knows that although young, this creature is a dragon. It could easily hurt him, and although Rose might intervene, he is still worried. He gives the little dragon some potion, and Colin aloud suggests that it is bait for a contract. Before she can say more, the other girls quickly silence her, and the little dragon drinks the expensive potion. Rusty thinks he should have taken concentrated solutions of magical elements needed to prepare high-quality potion. Although they are hard to make, he briefly recalls the solutions he left at the Alchemists Association and hopes they are safe. Focusing again, the alchemist remembers that making a contract is connected with the primal magic of the dragon. As they say in fairy tales and myths, soon he pulls out a sharp knife. I tell the Juras that it is made from a horned horn. He explains that according to legends, the ritual of making a contract begins with a person bringing blood, and determination is visible on his face. He places the knife on his wrist, preparing to make a small cut. Rusty makes a cut on the wrist with the knife, and lets the blood flow over the engraved patterns on the blade, trying to create a coat of arms from his own blood, while stating his name and intention. After the bond with the dragon, something unexpected happens. After his statement, ancient symbols began to appear before him, a spectacle that was both impressive and confusing, but the symbols clearly meant something. Colin noticed his reaction and asked if he noticed anything. The alchemist became even more puzzled. He checks with the girls and finds out that they see nothing. He describes a polygonal plate forming in front of him and admits that he does not know what it is. The alchemist carefully studies the plates, which resemble alchemical rings but apparently are not. They are almost liquid, and it seems the dragon is urging him to touch them. Holland asks Ari if her magic eye senses anything, but only Rusty sees the strange phenomenon. It might be the primal magic they talked about. Meanwhile, the Rusty faces encountered completely unfamiliar symbols. He thinks that by touching different parts, one can discover different meanings and understand what these strange letters signify, and Rusty knows he must act cautiously. But curiosity pushes him to take the risk. When he touches the glowing symbols, they begin to change shape, and he supposes their number is related to the pattern. But he is not sure about their system or what will happen if he continues to touch them. He looks at the little dragon and notices that it understands what is happening. The alchemist sees light from the wound on his wrist and touches the plates again, causing the entire tent to glow brightly. When the light dims, Rusty notices a fiery tattoo on his hand. The baby dragon has grown and is now a little dragon with the same pattern on its chest. Stunned by the sudden growth, he strokes the dragon and decides to give it a name, combining safe with sacred and look with one who flies. He named it Salok. Obviously, he successfully made a contract with the dragon. Late at night, Colin unexpectedly tells Rusty that she will come to his tent. She came so late that it was unusual, and the alchemist was a little surprised. She carries a bottle and notices that they have rarely seen each other lately. Walking forward, she carefully takes a device out of the box because Rusty is picky about tools for experiments. The alchemist smiles and accepts her gesture, saying he cannot refuse, and assures her that the vessels he uses are thoroughly washed and safe. Colin asks about a snack and it turns out she brought it, and Rusty did not notice. She shows him a package with meat and fish. Rusty is impressed by her thoughtfulness and asks Rose to arrange a small dining corner. In a few minutes they sat at the table. Colin pours him a drink and sees that he freely wanders around the tent. She offers the dragon a drink. That flies onto the alchemist's shoulder to rest there. Colin is impressed by their strong bond and wonders if it was caused by his potion. She watches as Sailor drinks one potion and heals because she knows that most potions taste like herbs and are usually unpleasant. Rusty pretends to be offended by Colin's remark about his potion, but he knows she is just joking. They raise their glasses, toasting to new connections. The alchemist is sincerely grateful to Colin. If not for her invitation, he might still be in the Alchemists Association, stuck in routine or gone another way. Thinking about how much he owes her, Rusty is happy while drinking, but his pleasure turns to shock as the drink chokes him. He asks Colin what it is. She says it is called Free Spirit. Colin explains that this drink can ignite anything. She herself hasn't tried it, thinking it a waste, but it is clearly strong. Seeing Rusty struggle, Rose suggests diluting it with water. He stirs the drink and slowly tastes it, trying to get used to the new flavor. Then he turns to Colin, asking for her opinion. As he suspected, she came not just for the drink. When Colin speaks, the alchemist interestedly tries to find out her real reason. The commander finally mentions the road construction project she spoke about earlier, pouring herself another drink, and explains that they are now ready to start working on the plans that begin in a few days. Colin shares his hope that Rusty will help with the road work. He listens attentively and understands that the road is important for their future. Despite the initial shock and discomfort from the strong drink, he feels a new sense of purpose. Rusty readily agrees to join the road construction. She is impressed by how well Colin handles her drinks. Despite her numerous duties as a feudal lady, he smiles when she offers a drink, as if saying, "Look, trying to befriend the dragon." Thinking that this is what friends do, he decides to stay with her and enjoy the evening. The next morning, Rusty does not feel so energetic. He is worried because he feels changes within himself after the contract, although nothing has changed outwardly. The transcription scroll shows physical data, and he uses a pendulum to check immaterial aspects. The alchemist thinks that there is something more in the world than magical elements and builds theories about strange plates that appeared during the contract. Irritation grows as he asks to say the word "look" to summon the tablet again. The dragon cannot do this. Rusty thinks that the plates appeared only because of the contract. Before he can think, the district arrives and signals that it is time to start building the road. When Rusty and Eri go to Hippo, the alchemist asks Saikyou to stay with Rose while they are away. To his surprise, Sailor insists on going with him and settles on his shoulder. The alchemists agree to bring the dragon and set off to the destination. On the way, Eri glances at the dragon flying nearby and notices its elegance. Rusty nods and says he did not expect dragons to be so graceful. He is truly impressed by how easily Saikyou soars in the air. Era says she must be the first in a century to connect with a dragon. She says his knowledge is not limited to alchemy and adds that during the contract ritual, no one knew what was happening. Rusty downplays it, saying it just somehow happened. His thoughts returned again to the mysterious numbers and the translucent plate he saw. He briefly told the girls about his actions and was the only one who saw those mythical symbols, so during the journey he was worried that he had not investigated it further. Rusty cannot stop thinking about the strange phenomena he saw, and the mysterious plate and its symbols seem to be the key to understanding the primal magic related to the contract. And despite inner conflict, the alchemist is determined to learn more about these symbols and their meaning. He hopes that over time and with new experiments, he will find answers and better understand the magic that connects him with Saikyou. For now, he is focused on building the road ahead and knows the journey is only beginning. Rusty realizes that reproducing the results is vital because otherwise his conclusions might be considered fiction, and he smiles at Saikyou, glad that the dragon is enjoying itself. Suddenly, Era warns him about monsters approaching from below, which she noticed with her magical eye. She quickly prepares for battle and raises her spear, and the alchemist admires her quick reaction. Eric reports that she barely defeated a dangerous group of monsters. She was worried that she had lost her form because she had previously easily handled an armored salmon. Rusty orders Saikyou to climb up, and Ariel warns him that 2 more monsters are approaching, and he leads the hippo to the right. Before he can react, a mutilated creature appears. But let's say Look dives down and easily defeats it. The alchemist feels both relief and surprise at the dragon's quick action. 2 people are stunned by its speed and strength. Everyone is even more impressed watching its impressive attack. They had heard legends about dragons, but seeing a dragon in action is something else entirely. When they approach the fallen monster, Rusty carefully examines it. He says it is a chimera, a strange combination of a small mouse and a centipede, possibly with mushrooms growing from its belly. This mixture of four creatures is rare and unknown in this region. The alchemist thinks it might be a new species and is curious about what attracts Hippo and Sailor's attention. He notices that the scenes with the hippopotamus cause concern. Sensing something strange in the creature, Rusty checks the rewritten scroll and finds no traces of poison or threat. He considers taking the monster for further study, but sees that Hippo is categorically against it. He suggests instead burning the creature to eliminate any risks. He asks Ari if she agrees to take a pause to figure this out. Ari agrees to help. The alchemists instead advise her to continue observing, while he applies some potion to the limbs of Hippo and Salix to protect them from possible harm. Rusty sets the monster on fire and watches as the flames engulf the monster. As the fire burns, he momentarily thinks he sees something moving in the flames. Ari's voice brings him back, saying they are ready to continue the journey, and he turns away, leaving the ashes behind, ready to continue their mission. Once the monster is subdued, the alchemist and his companions move on, their thoughts occupied by that strange creature.